Meeting recording has about to start.
I see the note.
Yep. And I'm going to ask right now, who is here for the Aldersley project?
Okay, we're in.
This is Peter Lynn. I'm part
Peter
of
Lynn?
the Alders.
Okay. And who else is on your team?
This is Susan with Perkins-Eastman. I'm the architect.
Yep.
Okay.
And I believe Gilbert Carrasco is also on. He might be joining here.
Yeah, no, I see him
here.
and Janie.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And Michael, you are with whom?
Neighborhood at Los Gamos project. I'm the civil engineer.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so members of the Aldersley team, I'm actually going to demote you to attendee while the first item is up. So I have Peter Lynn, Sue Gilbert, and Janie. We will see you soon.
All right, sounds good.
So,
Leslie, can I chime in?
yes.
So I just
Who
got
said
a
that?
text from Don Blaney who's
Oh.
having trouble logging in, but he can call in, which could
And I
solve
will promote him.
your
Yeah,
solve your quorum issue.
yes, definitely.
Okay, so can I tell him the number? How can he do this?
He can
the
call, yeah.
Telephone numbers on the
Six-
agenda.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right
6
now.
Yeah.
Sharon,
I got it. Let me tell him.
Okay.
Sharon's already logged in, so we don't have a quorum issue on.
Oh, okay. I didn't see her in there.
Just came in.
I don't see her. Oh, yeah. There. Hi, Sharon.
Okay, well, that solves that issue. I'm gonna still let Don know so he.
Well, yeah, because
Yeah,
the more the merrier.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I will mute myself and get Don to, and then I will, Leslie, I'll tell you Don's number if you want to jot it down, because he's gonna probably call
yes,
you
please.
from 415-302-9272.
Okay.
Okay,
I will
cool.
look for him.
And I'll keep in touch with him.
Janie.
Okay, then are we all set?
We are.
Have all the principles in place. We have a quorum. So let's open up the meeting. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Design Review Board on Tuesday, October 5th, 2021. This meeting is called to order. I'll request staff to call the roll for members who are present and who are not. Leslie?
So yes, board member Blaney is currently absent, but may be joining us shortly. And if I notice that he's here, I will maybe interrupt us to announce that he
Yes,
has attended.
Particularly.
Board member. Okay, board member Kent,
Here.
board member Kowalski,
Here.
board member Summers,
Present here.
Vice Chair Reggie is absent today, and Chair Paul.
Here. Thank you. Next, we'll move to the meeting procedures. Due to the COVID-19 shelter-in-place order, we have had to establish new ways of conducting our public meetings. I'd like to ask staff to address how the public comment will work this evening. Leslie?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. In addition to accepting written comments to the DRB, this meeting is accepting public comments over the telephone. And just for anyone in attendance who submitted comments after the package submittal, we do submit them to the DRB members. However, please know that if it didn't arrive until today, they may not have had time to review it. So you may want to have an oral comment as well. So if you do want to speak, you can phone in if you are not logged in using the number 669-900-9128. And the meeting ID is 814-0483-9089 #. This is also can be found on the agenda, the DRB agenda, which is online. And when the public comment is open and you wish to speak, and I will repeat that every time we open the public comments, please press *9 if you're phoning in to raise your hand. If you're here kind of in the attendee list, just hit the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. And if you're phoning in when your name is called, please dial, please do *6 to unmute yourself. So with that, as I mentioned, your public, if you provided written comments, they have been distributed to the board members for review. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me now describe the meeting procedures. We'll begin with a staff report for each item, followed by the applicant's presentation. Members of the public will be invited to speak. Community members on the conference call can speak as well when they receive the notification that they have been unmuted. And please keep your comments to 3 minutes. The board will have the opportunity to ask questions of staff or the public after each segment. And then we will close the public hearing and bring the matter back to the board for any additional questions or discussion. Is there anyone with an urgent communication on a topic not on the agenda tonight? And if so, you may address the board at this time.
And as I mentioned, to raise your hand, please hover over the icon at the bottom of the screen and press raise hand. And if you're phoning in, please press *9. And I do not see anyone wishing to speak.
Okay, therefore we'll move on to the consent calendar, which has one item, minutes from the August 3rd, 2021 Design Review Board meeting. For the approval of the design board meeting, are there any comments from the public on the consent calendar?
And again, if you wish to speak, either raise your hand with the icon or press *9 if you are phoning in. And I see no one wishing to speak.
All right, then, is any member of the board wish to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve as submitted.
We'll second.
I should ask, when you make your motions, because of these new procedures, you should announce who you are so that we can record your name. So,
Okay,
Jeff,
Member Jeff Kent moves to approve the minutes as submitted.
I will second. Board Member Summers.
great. Is there any further discussion on the minutes? I see none. So Leslie, would you take a roll call for the vote?
Yes. Board Member Blaney is still absent. Board Member Kent.
Aye.
Board Member Kowalski.
Aye.
Board Member Summers.
Aye.
Vice Chair Reggie is absent, and Chair Paul.
Aye. Okay, then the minutes are approved, and we'll go on to the action items on the public hearing. The first item on the agenda is item number 2, the neighborhood at Los Gamos. It's a mixed-use project with 192 multifamily residential units, an approximately 5,600 square foot market, a 5,000 square foot community center, and 225 at-grade and semi-subterranean parking spaces on a 10.24 site at 10.24 acre site located on Los Gamos Road north of Oleander Drive. Could we have a staff report from the project planner?
Sorry, excuse me.
I'm
I'd
sorry,
like to
Jeff
introduce Jeff. Yes,
Yes.
I would like to introduce Jeff Hamilton. He is the staff planner and our contract planner from MIG.
Hi, Jeff.
So take it away,
Hello.
Jeff.
I guess I'll share my presentation, my screen with the presentation. Make sure I know how to do this. Can you see the presentation?
I'm only seeing a black screen right now.
I've got black screen too.
Okay,
It
let me
says you're
try.
sharing your screen, but it's black.
Understood. Let me see if I can
Maybe it's just a
fix that.
slide.
No, I think I've got, anyway, I think I've got it in the wrong position, basically.
Actually,
Now
while
can you
this
see
is
it?
going on,
Zoom is certainly challenging, isn't it?
Share your screen again.
Share my screen again. Share screen,
oops.
share.
And
There
Now
we
can
go.
you see it?
Yes.
Yes, there we go.
Okay, very good.
if I
Um,
could just interrupt for 1 second, I apologize. A board member, Blaney, has phoned in, so he is in attendance, and somehow I can't promote him as a panelist since he phoned in, but I have allowed him to talk, so hopefully he'll be showing up. So thank you. Sorry about that, and move forward. Thank you.
So members of the Design Review Board, this project is called or known as the Neighborhood at Los Gamos. The requested applications that have been submitted so far are a general plan amendment to change the designation from Hillside Resource Residential to Neighborhood Commercial Mixed Use, a zone change to change the property from Planned District Hillside Development Overlay District and Residential Hillside Development Overlay District to a Planned Development District, a vesting tentative parcel map to combine and adjust the boundaries of the existing parcels, and environmental and design review application for development of the site with a major physical improvement since it consists of more than 3 dwelling units. This is an overview of the site plan. This is as mentioned before, it's a 10.24 acre site with 192 apartments. The applicant has proposed to make at least 10% of the units in the project affordable below market rate. The project includes a 5,574 square foot market, a 5,003 square foot community center, and the maximum height of the structures is 58 feet. There are 225 parking spaces primarily located underneath each of the 6 buildings, but there are also 42 at grade parking spaces located sort of in the central part of the project. Trash is proposed to be stored in receptacles beneath the buildings and will be brought out by the trash collection company during pickup and then put back underneath the buildings. There's of the 10.24 acre site, 4.83 acres are proposed to be unimproved open space. That is, 4.83 acres will not be graded or disturbed. There'll be a 0.34 acre improved hillside on the southern part of the property, sort of known as the South Park area. And there'll be 1.29 acres of improved landscaping around the project site. The average slope of the site is 36.9%, and the proposed project will remove 55 of the 285 existing trees, but it will also plant 210 new trees. The green highlighted area shows the South Park area. The red outlines indicate the location of the residential buildings. The yellow outline indicates the location of the market and community center building that's on the north side of that central area, and then the village commons sort of recreational area to the south side of that central area. And then the red arrow shows the access driveway that provides access from the project site out to Los Gamos Road. Here's another overview of provides a bit broader context of the site. The site in this image is in the lower left-hand portion of the screen. It shows the existing traffic barrier on Los Gamos Road. It shows the location of the YMCA building and the Kaiser Clinic along Los Gamos Road. It shows 101 freeway, and it shows some surrounding hillside, residential, and commercial areas in the vicinity of the project. This site plan provides additional detail about where the areas of disturbance or where the grading will occur, primarily in the area sort of in the central and northern parts of the site, outlined with the building footprints, and then the brown areas are the sort of grading areas. There will be a minor amount of grading in the improved open space in the South Park area to create some recreational areas. The red arrow and the red line shows the approximate location of the access barrier that will remain unchanged by the proposed development of the site. The site improvements will require 88,000 cubic yards of grading and 54,000 cubic yards of soil export. This is an image from the hillside west of the site, looking across the highway towards the existing hillside. This shows the existing office building at 1401 Los Gamos and YMCA, and then the hillside where the site is going to be located. This is a close-up view of the South Park recreational area portion of the site. This shows some of the improvements, including a path, some recreational features. This site will be improved with drought-tolerant California native shrubs. There'll be some children's play areas, and there'll be a bridge from the residential component of the project across an existing drainage path over to this recreational area. So most of that drainage, well, not most, the drainage will be undisturbed by this improvement in this hillside area. There'll be a bridge across that drainage. This is the central area of the project where the village commons, which is sort of passive recreation on the left side of this area, is located. In addition, and then on the right is where the market and community center are. On the roof of the community center is located additional recreational area, an outdoor sort of open space area, a pergola that provides some shade and seating, a children's play area. And then on the left there are 3 terraces that provide outdoor seating, some covered trellises that provide some shade, and a lawn area. This total area of this part of the property provides about 10,000 square feet of recreational open space. There are some retaining walls being proposed to improve this area, to support this area. The maximum wall height at this central part of the upper terrace is 16 feet. There's a 14-foot wall here on the middle part of the site supporting the middle terrace, and there are 2 10-foot walls at the bottom supporting the lower area of the terrace. It's worth pointing out that not all of these walls, not all this wall height will be exposed, because in this area, on either side of this upper red arrow, there are stairs down into the terrace. So the stairs will obscure a substantial part of that tallest wall. In these seating areas and recreational areas, there's lawn at the upper area, there's seating in the middle, but there will also be a water feature. And on the lower terrace, there's going to be seating, and they're anticipating or proposing a small fire pit for evening enjoyment. This is an image, a rendering of what the project would look like, or is proposed to look like, looking to the west, showing the office building to below the property and the YMCA below the property. And as you can see from this, the proposal is that the new structures will all be well below the ridge line behind and to the east of the site. This is a rendering that shows, is a nicer and more enhanced rendering that shows that sort of a similar view, but down sort of at the level of the freeway looking up at the hillside. This is another rendering proposed view of the project looking from Los Gamos up the hillside towards the southwest. This is a view up the access driveway looking at the central part of the site where the village commons is sort of centered on the driveway, and then the market and community building are off to the right underneath that prominent pergola. This is the pergola on top of the community center that shows some of the recreational features in that area. This is an elevation of one of the 2 types of residential buildings. There's a type A and a type B. The type A building, they're both very similar. The type B building is slightly taller. This type A building uses both rooftop articulation and horizontal articulation, some ins and outs to create some interest. The elevator and stairwell towers project further forward, and then portions of the buildings on either side set back a ways. And you can see one of the issues that's before the board is this notion of the gables facing down the hill rather than the gables following the hillside. This is gables following the hillside is preferred by the Hillside design guidelines. This is a topic for your discussion. To the right is a view of the south elevation of this type A building, which shows it stepping up the hill and sort of following the level of the hill. This is the building type B, which is a slightly taller building. This is the building that would have the maximum height of 58 feet. This is the east elevation as the other elevation showed the east elevation, which is the front elevation facing down the hill. It also uses roofline articulation and some horizontal articulation to show the building stepping up the hill and breaking up the mass. This is an elevation of the Market Community Center building, which shows the parking at the ground level, the market at the middle level, the community center at the upper level, and then the outdoor recreational area on the roof. On the right shows an elevation from the south that emphasizes the way this building steps up the hill and follows the hillside. It also shows how the stairwell elevator tower moves forward and pushes forward and creates a narrow but linear vertical surface. This is a typical section of the residential building, which shows the various floors, the parking level in the gray at the bottom. And you can see that in any particular section, this on to the south side or the east side of the building, it's 4 stories. To the right, it's a maximum of 5 stories, but under your code, it's basically 4 stories above grade. To the right in this image, you'll see a typical section through retaining walls that are proposed to be located behind each of the residential buildings to support the hillside behind the buildings as part of the grading plan. A series of retaining walls is being proposed behind residential buildings 3, 4, and 5. And none of these walls, even though some of these walls are 10 feet tall, none of them will be taller than the buildings that they're behind. So none of these particular retaining walls will be visible off the site, really. This shows a broader section through the hillside. This section is through the community center, which is at the lower part of the hill, and then the residential building above. It shows the natural grade in a dashed line, and it shows the different levels, and it shows the existing property lines above and below the site. This is a section through the more southerly of 2 of the residential buildings, and also shows the relative location of the office building below the site. It shows the height to the pitched roof, shows the location of the floors in relation to the hill, and it shows some of these retaining walls behind the buildings. The project details are the residential units will consist of studios, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom units. The 2-bedroom units come in 3 floor plans. There are a total of 192 units with the number of units laid out as you see. Floor areas for the studio are going to be 496 square feet. 1-bedrooms are going to be 735. The 2-bedroom units range from 762 to 1,070 square feet. And the 3-bedroom units are going to have 1,153 square feet. Each unit on the project will have an outdoor balcony or deck ranging from 72 to 143 square feet. I mentioned existing trees on the site. The survey showed that there's 285 trees, including 256 oak, 21 bay laurel, and 8 other types. Of these, 55 trees, including 51 oaks, are proposed for removal. The city has a requirement in the parking ordinance that 11 trees are required in parking areas, and this is going to be more than met by the proposal to plant 210 new trees, including 55 Cathedral Live Oaks as part of the project. These are images of some of the proposed trees, including the Cathedral Live Oak. And I mentioned in the staff report that this is not on the Hillside Design Guidelines approved tree list, but it is an oak. It's a very nice oak. And the reason the applicant chose it is because it has a taller form and is more suited to being a street tree or a tree along the internal driveway system than either the Coast Live Oak or the California Black Oak, which has much more of a spreading character. So that's the choice that they've made. As I noted in the staff report, this seems like a reasonable substitution. In terms of general plan consistency, there are sort of 4 general plan items to consider. Residential density is spelled out in land use 1.8. Up to 24 units per acre is allowed and 18.75 are proposed. The land use policy 1.9 encourages clustering, and that is used in this project as a way to minimize grading and preserve the majority of the trees. And land use policy 1.10 allows an FAR of 0.01 for the non-residential component, and that is what is proposed, so it's consistent with that. The primary issue or the consistency issues before you are the Hillside design guidelines items, which encourage clustering, horizontal and vertical articulation of the buildings, minimizing grading, preserving the existing natural features, including mature trees, topography, and drainage. The gables are recommended to follow the hillside. Parking should be tucked under buildings. Usable open space should be grouped. Children's play areas should be included with at least 400 square feet, and each unit should have private and usable open space. This is not an exhaustive list of all of the items, but these are some of the key points that we wanted you to focus on. The project utilizes clustering to minimize grading. It utilizes horizontal and vertical articulation to break up the building massing. Virtually all the parking is tucked under the buildings, including the commercial parking underneath the community center and market. The majority of the existing trees will be preserved, and a substantial number of new oak trees will be planted. The existing drainage paths, both north and south of the development area, will be preserved. The project is located below the ridgeline to the west, so it will not daylight above that ridgeline. Each unit has private and usable decks. There's a village commons that creates a recreational area of about 10,000 square feet and includes about 610 square feet for a children's play area near the center of the development. So it's a very accessible part of the project. In addition to that, there's the South Park Hillside area, which creates another large, over 14,000 square feet of common open space, again, with a path that's easily accessible from the residences. And both these areas provide multiple recreational opportunities with recreational options for different people. The environmental review is being prepared by an independent consultant. It's not complete yet, but it will be circulated in the near future. And it's being prepared as a mitigated negative declaration. That's the draft form of the document. Currently, it's in draft form, but we can tell you that there are no unmitigatable impacts have been found yet, and none are anticipated. And in the draft document, there's proposed mitigation measures for aesthetics, air quality, biology, cultural resources, geology and soils, hydrology and water quality, and tribal cultural resources. Several of these refer simply to developing the project in ways that meet building code or implement best practices for minimizing dust. And the cultural resources items are in case things get found. There are no known cultural resources on the property. In summary, the project proposes some additional housing that the city needs on a challenging site. In general, the staff feels that the project meets the intent of the design guidelines in that it minimizes grading and maximizes the preservation of the existing landscape and topography. It separates but clusters the building in a way that helps the project conform to the hillside while minimizing the building footprint. The trade-off is that the buildings are somewhat tall and boxy. The proposed landscaping scheme, although it includes trees not on the approved list, appears reasonable, and the use of replacement oaks is especially welcome. So staff seeks board input on the following: whether the design of the buildings has sufficient vertical and horizontal articulation, 1, to avoid creating a wall effect, 2, to avoid large expanses of a wall in a single plane on the downhill elevations, 3, to create sufficient shadows, and 4, to avoid extended horizontal lines. Whether the gable ends should face downhill, and whether the use of trees not on the approved list in the Hillside design guidelines is appropriate. With that, that completes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions of of staff at this point?
I have a question.
And
The entry driveway, what's the slope of that, of the one entry into the site? Is that known?
It's on the plans. I don't have it off the top of my head. I believe when the applicant does his presentation, he's probably best equipped to answer that
Okay.
immediately, or his
Okay.
engineer.
Yeah, I didn't see it. I looked through. Okay.
and if Board Member Blaney, if you wish to speak and want to unmute yourself, please press *6. Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions of staff at this point, or should we go on to the applicant's presentation? Seeing none, is the applicant here to present? Is that Chris Hart or
Yes.
Colin Russell, or both?
Yes, Chris Hart here. I've lucky enough to bring my my entire team with me, so I thank you all very much for having us. You'll hear from myself, Shilpa Stove, as well as Colin Russell, and then any other additional questions you may have that we can answer. Cognizant of time, so I will be quick in my presentation and let us focus on the design aspects of this site. I am a lifelong resident of Santa Fe, choosing to raise my family here as well. I've got 3 young kids, and we've owned this site for quite some time. In fact, we built 1401 Los Gamos Road originally. So when we can get to the easement and how that's in place for the driveway and the access to the site. But 10.24 acres along the 101 corridor. I had a lot of ideas of how to make this site and what I wanted to bring to the table, and talking to Paul Jensen and Rafi and Dali, but really sitting through the general plan 2040 meetings as one of really the only person in the public sitting in the back there most of the time. I decided that no, what's most important isn't what I think. What's most important is this. We've always started with design first. And I wanted to bring the team to the table to say, give us the best thing that you can fit into the space that we've been given, to the space that we have. The site is what will dictate what's available here, not Chris and Chris's ideas. So 10.24 acres along Highway 101 with not a single car passing an existing residential home. That's been a very, very important thing to us. All access is off of Lucas Valley and then down Los Gamos Drive. Very close to walking distance, and obviously close to Kaiser, YMCA, etc. as we go down the path. Community outreach was significant. Tonight, in fact, may be, and I'll check my records, but this may be the 100th meeting that we've had on this development as we've gone around everybody and asking them how to make this a better project. And that's really what community outreach has been for us. On the 30th of September, just this past Thursday, we had our neighborhood meeting, about 70 people or so in attendance. But we've met with a whole host of people through this process, whether it's the Santa Fe Chamber of Commerce, Miller Creek School District, Santa Fe Manor, etc. Back in July of 2020, we had our Planning Commission concept meeting to see if this made sense. And I think our design review meeting was the very first COVID Zoom meeting to talk about the design aspects of it. And the outcome really has been multifamily housing is right. How can we handle more housing for the city of Santa Fe? And then really, can we make this a neighborhood, a sense of place, and be additive to the entire Terra Linda neighborhood overall? When we think about housing and the design and the creation of it, some people like to call it the missing middle. Some people call it workforce housing. What I know is that there's a lack of housing. Simply put, there's a lack of supply of housing with a lot of people. We are proponents of building affordable units or below market units. We believe that there will be a little bit of a glut, and therefore we want to focus only on the low income units and do all 20 units versus a fraction of some unit. Size has also become important. So 50%, more than 50% of the units will be 2 and 3 bedroom. And then less than 19 units per acre, as we talked about. And as Jeff so kindly mentioned that, 50% of the site will remain open. When we think about ridgelines and what's important in San Rafael and frankly in Marin County, the ridgelines are important. And as we were going through the 2040 general plan, that continued to come back on me. Luckily, the site requires it to be low on the hill. That's a good thing. So we're 590 feet from the property line to the closest ridge. And on the northern side, having done this trek a lot, 670 feet. So we want to be low, we want to provide housing, and we want to keep what's beautiful about San Rafael and what's beautiful about Marin and be additive overall. With that, I will introduce Shilpa Stove, and then she'll lead it off to Colin Russell. So I thank you all very much. Shilpa?
Thank you very much, Chris. Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. I wanted to go through the site planning considerations for this project first. The key design drivers were the site's natural topography, beauty, and magnificent views of the bay looking east. Our vision was to create a unique identity for this property through careful siting of each building, built around a framework of common area spaces to create a safe and lively neighborhood. Buildings like you see here on the screen are tucked into the hillside to reduce the overall scale as you view it from Los Gatos or 101. The project has two major components. On the south side is the park, and the north part, which we call the neighborhood core, is where most of the grading and development is restricted. We have the two ephemeral drainage courses in the north and the south that have been left untouched, like Jeff has mentioned in his presentation. Let me just clear my screen here. This is the entry to the neighborhood as you view it from Los Gatos. And as you peel off of Los Gatos, you're greeted by the series of terraced open spaces with the tree canopy along the ridgeline extending from the top of the hill down to the entry. And as board member Sharon asked, the slopes here are about 15%. Next slide. So minimizing impacts to the existing trees to the greatest extent possible was the key driver of this site plan. To achieve this, the buildings, the loop road, which is this guy here, and all the pedestrian paths were designed to respect the existing slopes and character of the site, thus minimizing grading and disturbance to the existing vegetation. This particular image basically shows how we've nestled all the buildings between the existing trees and have done we've really done a great job saving existing trees and minimizing impacts on the hillside. The fabric of the neighborhood is held together by the community center, and Jeff touched on it a little bit. I'm going to go into the detail. The biggest intent for us was to be able to connect both the community center and the open space horizontally and vertically. So the lawn area on the upper level here is connected to the roof terrace of the community center. The middle tier, which is this guy here, is connected to the office spaces. And the lowmost tier is connected to the market and the bakery. The wall heights that Jeff has mentioned are all located in the zone. And the walls are actually by design. We made a very deliberate move to make sure that we can connect these open spaces horizontally, both to building 2, as well as the community center. Use the stepping to make sure that each terrace looks over the terrace below it, and make sure that all the walls, as you come up Los Gamos are fully screened except for the wall that's located right here. Now that also was a deliberate move. What we want to do is make that wall an art wall where some local artist creates this beautiful piece of art that you view as soon as you enter Los Gamos. This is my favorite view. I think I've said it the third time in a meeting. This view is looking out towards the San Pedro Mountain Open Reserve Space and the bay. The Community Center Plaza is composed of various scales of spaces, seating for intimate conversations, step lawn areas for reading, gathering friends, covered area for board games, and also a custom playground that is designed to teach young kids about the California flora and wildlife. The program for the Village Commons includes a collection of site furnishings that are intended to support the design vision of a healthy community. Elegant trellis structures with hanging chairs, a variety of benches, different configurations of fire table are proposed as site furnishings. Now we are using permeable pavers, which you see here on the top right-hand corner, on the entire plaza space on the upper level, which I failed to mention when I zipped past the site plan. But when I come around, I will point that out. The whole intent was to create an exciting public realm, and that was the priority for the design team. This is example of the playground structures that we are proposing. It's all designed or customized to the California flora and fauna. All the light fixtures proposed on the site are dark sky friendly. This is the large neighborhood park to the south, and it consists of passive and active recreational spaces, overlooks and picnic areas, all connected to the larger open space network. A key component of this particular park was to enhance the existing habitat. We are using soil cement paving everywhere along these paths to minimize impacts to the existing grade. And the adventure playground that's located right here is located on existing slope. And what that does for us is, one is it creates this super challenging playground that's fun for kids. And we are using the existing grade to create a slide, like you see in this image, or climbing structures. The other thing we are doing is any of the existing oaks that are being cut down, we are using the logs from those trees to create climbing structures. I'm going to hand this over to Chris, but before I just do that, I wanted to point out that this is the perspective view looking from 101 towards the Hillside. And I believe you guys just saw the elevation that Jeff had shown of the same view. Chris, you can, sorry, Colin, you can take it from here.
Thanks. Good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. I have been an affordable housing advocate for over 30 years now. I was actually chairman of the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce, also chairman of their Affordable Housing Committee, and I've been a board member of the Marin Environmental Housing Committee. And throughout that time, I've advocated for affordable housing, which Marin is in great need of, and I saw this as an opportunity to make a real difference because of the scale of this project. So it's been a joy to work with Chris and the team. This slide really emphasizes how low the project actually does tuck into the hill. As you can see, excuse me, I've got to do some commenting here. Sorry about that. I'm not sure how to make comments here. Oh, here we go. Hold on one second. Here we go. Excuse me, I'm kind of new at all this. So as you can see, the ridge line is way up above the top of the roofs, and we felt that the gable roofs were a critical design element that helped break the mass up and actually make this look like a residential development. Next, please. The site plan shows that these buildings are actually heavily articulated. On the lower level, these buildings actually step back, as you see here, to break the mass up. And as you can also see, the gable roofs break up that flat roof expanse and provide interest. The community center is really the hub of the whole operation. Next, please. And I think Shilpa's really explained very well how the terraces relate to the spaces within the center itself, which is here. And so we can go forward. And I think this view really illustrates it probably better than anything else. This is the terrace outside the market building, connecting to the on-grade terrace. This is the community center level, which connects to this terrace. And then the flat lawn area here connects to the upper plaza. These are the vertical elevator and stair elements that sit prominently forward. They have to be vertical all the way, so we made design elements out of them. Those include their own terraces and yet again more on the other side. Next. This is just a close-up of the roof of a typical building. Again, you can see how the building steps in plan and also all the articulations of the units themselves being pushed in, out as you go along. Next. This elevation is just meant to show how that pushing and pulling creates strong shadow lines and building interest, that the gables do the same thing. They actually serve a purpose. They allow morning sun to come in from the east and warm the spaces, but also provide shade in high sun areas or high sun seasons in the summer to keep the units cool. The cantilever decks actually shade the units below them. We have sunshades at every window, and the flat roof portions we're using for placement of solar panels. Next. Purpose of this slide was to just show how the buildings actually step up the site. The blue line indicates the roof lines, and I'll just draw those for you. So they essentially follow the terrain and stay pretty low on the site. And what happens beyond that is that the site keeps going and going and going, something like that. So you can see how low they sit on the site. This is the 1401 Los Gamos building. That gives you an idea of the relative scale of the buildings, and all the underneath areas are devoted to parking. And then above that, a tucked in layer of storage. Next. You saw this on Jeff's presentation, but we wanted to emphasize how the actual profile of the building steps up as well. What we've done is we've pushed the back floor up one level. That again allows for storage underneath. Everything sits on top of parking, and the roof lines step up with the terrain. This last slide really is meant to show the number of sustainable design features we've incorporated. The wide overhangs we've already talked about. We have sunshades at all the windows. We've already mentioned that. Solar panels on all the flat roofs. The cantilever decks provide shade below and inviting outdoor spaces for all the residents. Of course, we're going to have all double glazed insulating windows. We're providing electric vehicle charging stations throughout the site. Same for bicycle parking. We're looking very strongly at water conserving dual plumbing systems, so we can recycle the water and use it for landscape irrigation. Of course, energy efficient heating and cooling. We have used, as Shilpa says, night friendly lighting. It does not, it's all shielded lighting. And then another system that we're looking very strongly at is a system called BAMCore, which is actually bamboo core walls, which are actually prefabricated and pre-cut and brought to the site ready to erect. They're extremely good for fire suppression and thermal insulation. They save a lot of wood. It's a rapidly renewable resource. So we think this could be a real model for future projects. And with that, I think and the last little item that we slipped in this afternoon, this is the sample board. And as you can see, there's a variety of types of siding. Just to highlight a few, we've got hardy plank lap siding in 3 locations. Some are horizontal, some are vertical board and batten. This is a gray version of the same thing. But then we have the walls down below supporting the parking structure are a gray color, a sort of a muted gray. The idea here is to use earth tones that are compatible but not all warm. Some cool colors to give it a little counterpoint. Stucco walls in some units. Some are tan, some are gray. The wood trim will be a gray and a white mixture, and the gable roofs will be a composition shingle by Certainteed or some equal manufacturer. This is just an example of cobblestone gray. Windows will be clear anodized aluminum. And I think with that, I could turn it over to Chris.
Colin, thank you very much. Shilpa, thank you very much. The idea here was, how can we utilize the gift that we've been given with this 10.24 acres along the 101 corridor? How can we enhance the existing neighborhood, tie together, provide a sense of place, and be meaningful in everything that we do, no matter what? And really, as Colin mentioned, lead kind of forward. So if we can create housing is beautifully designed as this, utilizing the resources we have, we're ready to go. And I thank you all for your time. And if the question ever arises, I'll try this on now. We're ready to build as soon as we can get this thing through the process. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you all, and thank you all very, very much for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Does the board have any questions of the applicant or of staff?
I have a few for the applicant.
Go ahead, Tim.
If I can get organized here. That was a lot to unpack. One of the comments on the pathway, that it's a soil cement, is that for all pathways? Because I thought I saw on the plan there was also some DG pathways.
Yeah, so the soil cement pathways are on the south side in the park area. We really don't, we want to use existing soil and which minimizes grading. The decomposed granite pathways are on the north side through the North Development area.
So all the connections from the project itself to South Park is all the cement soil? All those pathways, the connectors?
All the pathways on the south side are all soil cement.
Got it. And then you also mentioned that, I guess it's in the village commons, that there's permeable paving. So yeah. I was part of the original subcommittee that looked at this a long time ago. So I'm trying to recall some of the things that went on, because unfortunately in the staff report, none of the comments from the subcommittee meeting made the staff report. So I have to kind of recreate in my mind what we had talked about. But one of the things we have talked about is trying to minimize the bioswales. And I know you use permeable paving there. Was any consideration to do that perhaps in the entranceway, to create some interest, and maybe even some of the parking areas for, create some interest in the parking areas and reduce the bioswales?
Absolutely. I didn't get a chance to talk about that, so I'm very excited about this question. Ross, do you mind sharing the presentation? Because I would like to show the extent of permeable pavers and silver cell that we are using. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ross. So we actually, from this entire area here, and I'm going to wait for Zoom to draw it in. The red area is the extent of permeable pavers on the upper terrace. The extent of permeable pavers at the entry is all of this. And the whole intent was to minimize the overall impervious surface on the project. We also have silver cell for stormwater retention. But for me, what silver cell does is it's going to give all these trees that we are proposing enough uncompacted soil to grow into their full potential. So it's serving a dual purpose.
Great, good to see. I still have one more question. I think just one more question on the tree selections. I know you've selected oaks. It's I've been working with trees a really long time. I'm not familiar with the Cathedral Oak or the scrub oak. What I have learned through research are actually native to the East Coast. And some say they need moisture and alkaline soil. And then the next breath they say, well, it tolerates drought and alkaline soil. So, so I'm a little confused about that whole thing. And since this is a signature tree for your project, that particular selection of that particular tree is pretty important. And so I'm wondering, has this been used in the Bay Area? Is it available in the trades? You know, what experience have people had with this tree? I mean, it is an oak, but it's not native to this area. So I'm a little less excited about it for that very reason.
Very good point. So this particular oak has been hybridized purely for a condition like our site. So in terms of being used in the Bay Area, it's been for the past five to 10 years, it's been used quite often in Pleasanton, but the closest to our site is Emeryville. It's used in their streetscape. If you go down past Christie Park, you see these trees. They are doing extremely well in really tight conditions. What makes them so great is that they do not need to be pruned as much as Coast Live Oaks or any other oak variety that's native to our region, which allows these trees to grow into a form that's natural to them. And when I live in San Anselmo and I see all these hacked oaks, which is so sad. Like, if we would have thought this through and planted the right type of oak, then we wouldn't have to worry about constantly trimming them and making them look like they weren't meant to be there. And that's part of the reason this particular tree was selected. The other reason is that these trees tolerate recycled water really well. And that you can see that actually on this Emeryville streetscape, because they receive the recycled water from MMWD, and they're doing really well.
So is there going to be recycled water used on this site for irrigation?
Yes.
And then sort of my last question on this oak, do we know about its relationship with SOD? How susceptible it is to sudden oak death?
Great question. We actually got that question 2 days ago, and no, it is not susceptible to sudden oak death, at least as far as any research is concerned. We consulted with 2 arborists, and both of them basically said they haven't seen an issue in the Bay Area with it.
And that's also true of the scrub oak?
We are using scrub oaks only in the open space areas. We are not using them in the streetscape zone because they are natives. To that point, there is some research that shows that it is susceptible to sudden oak death, but we're using it very minimally.
Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Other questions from the board members?
Yes, just on the subject of the trees and the lovely renderings we saw, and on these trees, since it's your signature tree, what's the rate of growth and when might we expect to see the screening effect that we're seeing on the renderings? And I didn't dig down into the gallon sizes. Are you guys going to plant box trees, or what? What's the game plan?
So we are coming in with 36-inch box trees for all the streetscape trees. There are a few trees that are going to be much larger than that, and those are mostly located in the Village Commons area. Depending on what size of tree we're able to haul onto the site, we definitely know that there are several trees in that zone that will be much, much larger. They're going to be feature trees. The 36-inch box selection was done after a lot of research associated with growth rates. So that's a splendid question. what we realized that because of our steep slopes, the 36-inch box tree and a 60-inch box tree within 2 years will have the same size, but the 36-inch box tree is going to do a lot better because it is smaller and can adjust to the steepest side. So that was the reason we selected the 36-inch box tree. And these trees, as far as oaks are concerned, are relatively faster compared to the Coast Live Oak. Now, I'm going to caveat this: all oaks for the first 2 years grow slowly. That's what oaks do. The next 3 years, they grow a little bit faster and then they take off. And that's true to this tree too, but it's much faster than a Coast Live Oak or any of the native oaks that we have on the project.
All right, thank you.
Is that it, Stuart?
That was it.
Okay. Any other board members have questions?
I have a couple questions.
Yes, sure.
Overall, I like this idea. I think it's a great place for housing. I have a couple of thoughts. I'd be interested to see a shadow study on that central plaza area. Those seem like high walls and it's facing east. So in the afternoon when people will be there, you know, how much sun and, you know, what's it getting there? I need to see more on the central plaza. I would love to see gray water incorporated into the project. It's a great opportunity when you're starting out right now to put it in from the get-go. And for your solar, I don't think the maximum placement is on the flat roof. It's on the south facing of your gables. And so I would check, just make sure that you're maximizing the potential of the solar. It's a, you know, I think it's really good for the community and environment. And I'm not sure the flat roofs are the best place. Maybe it's another place. I love BAMCore. It's really a great product, easy to install, really energy efficient. I think I applaud the choice.
Sure.
And one last thing, I am also unsure. Yeah.
We're in the questions section right now.
Sorry.
Comments will come a little later. So
sorry.
Questions of the applicant. This is the time to ask.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I just want to clarify that because we want to move on with this. Do you have any other questions of the applicant?
No.
Oh, okay. Don, we haven't heard from you. Do you have any questions? Is Don there?
And Don, if you can press *6. Nope. Yes, *6 to unmute.
And I have one more if I can get a chance later.
Well, let's just see if Don had a question.
Right, exactly.
Because he's got a harder time with being on the telephone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Don, can you hear us?
*6 to unmute. Can you press *9 to see if you're there? Then we can see you raise your hand.
No?
We're not sure, but he's.
All right. Well, if he does, let us know. But Jeff, go ahead.
Yep.
You have another question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if any of these units are ADA accessible.
Yes, they will be by law.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
they're actually all accessible by elevator. Every unit will be accessible via the elevator. We will designate some of the units as fully accessible units by code. So
Great.
yes.
Good to know. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we ever hear from Don? Well, I had a couple questions.
No.
Yeah, sorry about that, Don. I had a couple questions. One, Chris, you said that you were really an affordable, both Cole and Chris said they were really for affordable housing. I'm wondering, had you considered more than just 10% of this project being affordable?
That's a great question, Larry. Thank you for it. We have not considered more of it to be affordable, but we did decide that we would focus the affordable units down in the low income side of the equation and steer away from very low and the moderate side. I think there may be a little bit of a missing middle there with the low income side. So we wanted to address that. And then just round that number higher to 20 and build the units there. And then disperse them obviously throughout all of the buildings.
They would be dispersed then, yes.
I just wanted to add that all the units are really affordable by design. They're very compact, very efficient, but they live big because of the higher ceilings and the expansive glass. So
Sure.
they are affordable by design.
And these are all rental units, is that correct?
Correct.
There's no intention to condo them?
No.
Another question I had for you, Colin, is had you because of the extraordinary height of these buildings, set up into the hillside, had you considered stepping back the last or the top floor at all to try and mitigate some of that height? And at the same time, because you have some very high retaining walls, 10, I think up to 16 feet, had you considered stepping some of those retaining walls to minimize the aesthetic look?
We have, and if we could go to that building section, Ross, that's toward the end. That one. So the first move we made was to actually offset the floors so that the building itself steps up the hill in increments. The problem with stepping the top floor back is one of reaching it with the vertical circulation, particularly elevators. The elevators are out front and they need to be to gain access from the street. So the further you push that floor back, the more circuitous the route is from the elevator out in the front. We sort of felt that go back one, Ross, to the site section. Yeah, that one. We sort of felt that, that there were mitigating circumstances. Every tall building, all the three in back, is screened by the buildings below it. So you will never see those buildings unless you're on the site itself. You'll never see those buildings from the road or the freeway as full height. You'll see maybe the top 2 floors. And again, we've stepped the landscaping back. If I can just, hold on a minute, draw this. These stepped walls go right to the property line. That's as far as we can go. And that's where we need them the most. So I think we've done pretty much everything we can to make this a practical, workable building and still step up the hill.
Go back to that section of the building. Yeah, that one. The other question I have, is that supposed to indicate a driveway from the roadway up to the parking level?
Well,
that seems to be matching the 36% slope of the.
This is just taken at a point in the site where the road is lower, but it climbs to a point where the driveways are almost level with the parking level. So this doesn't really indicate a driveway. No, it's just a bank that you will see along certain parts of the building.
Okay. And then back to something you said before, had you done any studies of the building groupings from looking from the freeway going both north and south?
Yes, we did several, and actually there's two of them are, well, the first image that you saw in the presentation is taken from the freeway. That one. So that's actually right in the foreground, right in here is the end of the pavement for the freeway. And so everything just climbs up from there, and the buildings tuck in right in here.
Okay. Good. Those are my questions. Thank you. No other questions. Did we ever hear from Don Blaney? Leslie?
Don, no.
Oh, okay.
Don, again, if you can *6 to unmute yourself. And *9 to raise your hand so we know we can hear you.
He texted
You
me,
can hear
he's
us.
trying, he's tried to
Okay.
unmute many times, and I just told him the *9. I guess he's not gonna be able to pile on here. I know he's trying, though.
Okay.
He's got
if you
something to
can-
say, but he can't say it.
Okay,
Stuart, if you're
If you
talking
can-
to him, you have to tell him that he needs to figure this one out if he's going to participate in the next item.
Well, you have a quorum,
Oh, we
because
do.
you've got
That's
Jeff,
right, yeah.
and yeah, we're okay.
can you text him? Maybe he can hear me, and I'm gonna send him my invitation, and maybe that will work for him.
How are you gonna do that? Via text?
No, via email.
Leslie, if he hits that.
He
number
can't
9,
get on, you know what? He can't get on the internet, is what he said. So he literally is
Oh.
calling
Oh,
from
that's-
his phone.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But do you have to unmute him, Leslie?
No, he has to do it himself. I have asked him to unmute. And I don't have the power to.
If he's a member of the public, I mean, if he's basically coming in as a member of the public on the phone, then don't you have to unmute members of the public?
No, I've given him permission to talk.
Ah,
So, but they literally have to unmute themselves.
all right. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
so that seems to conclude the questions that the board had. So let's open up the hearing to the public. If there's anyone in the public that would like to speak on this agenda item. Leslie, would you tell them how to do that?
Yes. So again, if you are here on the phone, but it's only Blaney, press *9 to raise your hand. For the rest of you, if you wish to speak on this item, click the raise the hand icon at the bottom of your screen if you hover over it. You will have 3 minutes to speak. I don't have the ability, well, I have to figure out how to, I just will have the timer and I'll sort of let you know if 3 minutes are up. I don't have the way to show it. And please limit comments to elements under the purview of the Design Review Board, which is design analysis and evaluation of development proposals for their use and setting based on design standards adopted by the City Council. So again, if you'd like to speak, our first speaker is Bill Carney. And let me give you, I think I gave you permission to talk. Hold on.
Bill, you'll need to unmute yourself too, I think.
Yep, did I? Yes, so Bill, you will have to unmute yourself. You have permission to talk.
Got it. Okay. So
There
now,
you go.
Now you can.
Yep.
Thanks very much. Bill Carney, Sustainable San Rafael. And you know, the obvious upside of this development is the housing and the affordable housing and the smaller units. The downside from our standpoint, from a sustainability standpoint, is that to get there, you pretty much have to drive. So our comments sort of focus on that and would really encourage the developer to look at as many ways as possible to connect to the surrounding community. So walking, biking, et cetera, to the nearest transit, to Northgate, to shopping, et cetera. Just taking whatever, you know, doing that connective tissue between at the entrance to the site to make sure that people have an easy and inviting way of getting to those other destinations. And likewise, you know, you've got adjacent residential areas to the south, work environments to the north, to invite those folks up to utilize the market that you're providing so that there's maximum connection and people are less tempted to get in their cars. I think an important part of that is a pathway as a resident up there, having a pathway that connects your South Park area up to the open space along the ridge so that folks can, who are living there won't be tempted to jump in their car like I would to drive over to Las Colinas to watch birds or to, drive out to China Camp or something. But indeed, we'll just walk out as I do in Gerstle Park and walk up to the open space that's right adjacent to where I live. So that would be a big way of keeping people out of their cars, I think, and tying it to the community. Another thing about, basically you want to keep people out of their cars to reduce greenhouse gases, right? So I'm looking at all other ways that might be possible to build into this environment. We've talked quite a bit about landscape. I think sequestration trees would be something to look at. You've got a lot of open space here that you could augment with some really large trees. I'm thinking Valley Oak scale trees that could really bring in a lot of carbon. And I would be interested in seeing the carbon footprint of the Southern Live Oak that you're featuring, as well as I have some moisture concerns about that. But I think considering the bigger trees, the better in terms of carbon sequestration. And then making this a model building, as I think you've alluded to being all electric. And of course, that has to do with EV charging access for everybody who lives there, but also electric HVAC, heat pumps. This will model on what the city is working on in terms of this ordinances. This could be a model of that ordinance to show everybody that it's very viable to live totally electric. And then finally to plug into a provider of all renewable or fossil-free electricity, which MCE is due to provide to all of their customers in the next year, fossil-free, or you can buy it from PG&E also. The final thing from a sustainability aspect often overlooked is providing ample room that is accessible to Marin Sanitary for the recycling and to the residents for recycling, a big issue in multifamily projects. And that's a remaining part of our footprint that doesn't get looked at often enough. So make sure that's provided for. Okay, and then finally, I mentioned accessibility, that 15% grade, I think you mentioned, figure out a way that you can, have that wheelchair accessible to get up to your elevators from the larger public realm with a nice entry statement. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Other members of the public wish to speak?
And if you're phoning in, please press *9 to raise your hand. Otherwise, just hover over the icon. Raise your hand at the bottom of the screen. It looks like there are no other speakers tonight.
No. All right, then. Well, we'll close the public hearing then and bring it back to the board. If the board has any additional questions of staff or the applicant before we start our comment period? Are there any? I had a question, and that was brought up by Bill, I guess. The market is predominantly for the neighborhood. Is that the neighborhood being your development? Is that correct, or is it can it be used by the public?
Yeah, great question. No, it's none of the property we are proposing it to be fenced. We want public access. We want a sense of place there, Larry. And we do hope and encourage and want to be a viable market for the neighborhood, as well as really for the people along Los Gamos Drive who work there. I noticed that people get in their cars and they drive, but they have to drive a lot because there's nothing on that street. So this would be a viable option for them, and we would encourage and try to incent them to walk down there to do that.
They would have to basically walk up a lot though to get to the market. Is that correct? So what I guess what I'm asking is, if the market is not viable, do you have a plan B for that space?
So I'll let Colin chime in on this as well, but you walk up the entry, and then there's elevator access from that level up. to everything up there. So it's really just the entrance that you'd have to walk up at this point. Colin, anything else that you would add to that?
No, just that there's an elevator, there's a pedestrian entrance at the bottom level, the parking level of the community center that is open to the public. That's why those elevator and stair shafts are moved out front. So the people just need to come up the driveway and turn right, go about 50 feet, and they're into the building and up and into the market. So it's pretty easy. There's also parking under the market for the public.
I have a question. Is there much parking? I think I saw 12 spots or something.
Yeah, as
That's-
many as
that's
we.
Not a public parking.
Well, it would be intended for the public. It's as many as we could fit under the building as possible. You know, I think probably workers from the county and from the YMCA would walk it rather than drive it. But if someone were to be driving it, they could just hopefully find a space under the building and they would have immediate access.
Okay. And I had a question for staff. Jeff, as part of the design, the Hillside design guidelines, were the colors encouraged to be darker colors or not? I thought at one time they were, but I don't know if that's still in existence.
During my time reviewing this project, that issue never came up. It's my impression that the applicant has done a pretty good job with the colors in terms of creating a scheme that blends well with the existing landscaping and the existing hillside. So we have not discussed with him an option of making the color scheme darker.
Okay, thanks. So my question. No one has any other questions of staff or applicant? We will.
I just want to follow up on the colors. Just recently came up with another project that there is something in the general plan about having medium to dark earth tone colors in the hillside. There is an approved color board, however, by the design review, probably that predates all of you, maybe not. I'm not sure how old it is. That has a range of colors, and so it does include lighter colors that some may or may not consider medium to dark earth tones. So,
okay, good, thanks.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the board now for comments on the items that the staff has asked us to comment on. Sharon, would you like to start since you had some comments originally?
I do have some comments.
Thanks.
I'm a little worried about the plaza, and I'd like to see a shadow study. You know, after school, what does that plaza look like? Those walls are pretty tall. And I think gray water ought to be included. And I really think the solar needs to be looked at by a solar consultant or someone to really maximize it, because I think you've got potential there and it could really be used well.
Yes, that is the plan.
Overall, I like it. I feel like it would be a good addition to the community. I think some of the details need to get worked out. Like, I just don't see how that could be a community market with that much access and that much parking. I don't know.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Stuart.
Yes, Don Blaney is still trying to get through, so he's just out of luck tonight. So he's trying though, guys.
I'm sure
maybe he can. Maybe he can use some Morse code to get his comments in. First of all, to the team, you guys have presented a really nice project here. Really, your effort has not gone unnoticed by me. There looks like a tremendous amount of work has gone into this. Some public outreach, some meetings with the subcommittee. So, I mean, you guys are going about this all the right way, which I think is why we've resulted in a nice looking project, in my opinion, with specific bullet points to the planning staff that was asking questions about how it blends with the Hillside guidelines and things like the step backs. In this situation, with the way you've undulated the building and articulated it so well, I don't personally have any issue with the gable ends facing down the hill. So that very specific question, I think with this design, given that they're not huge, I think from the renderings shown, looks appropriate to me. I understand my question regarding this. We always see these beautiful renderings of fully mature trees. So, I'm satisfied with that answer. We know oaks grow slowly, and that's kind of why I was wondering what the expectation might be on this growing in. I think Sharon's comment about the patio and the common areas, it's a valid comment. I think you guys should study that for the sake of your own users, just to see, if we're going to create a pleasant space in there or something no one's going to use. The solar on the flat roofs, I know just from experience, they can put these things up on jacks and all kinds of different ways to find the sun. I'm astounded how well it works. I did like Bill's comment about you guys exploring heat pumps. You probably were going to land there anyways, because on this kind of a building in this kind of a complex, you guys are going to find that it's probably the most cost effective and energy efficient system. And honestly, with the way our energy codes are going now, with every project I'm fighting, you're likely going to be forced into using them just to get this thing to comply. So I'm getting hammered with it all the time. So that's probably happening anyways, which will go great with your solar. I think for this type of project and that location near the freeway, granted, yeah, we don't have a bus that necessarily stops there. Maybe Golden Gate Transit, I don't know how far away they are. I don't think they're too far away. But it's appropriate to me, and it's appropriate site. So I'm liking what I see.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Jeff?
Yeah, I like the project. I was on the subcommittee that saw this, which now seems like about 10 years ago, but I think it was probably only a year and some months. And I kind of have a vague recollection of what our recommendations were back then. It didn't make the staff report, but kind of based on my semi-failing memory, I think you probably addressed our comments pretty well. Kind of thinking back to the original meeting, I know there was some concern about pathway materials, and it looks like you've addressed that. There was some concern that the playground was too far away for all the kids, but you've addressed that by adding another one to what are we calling this, the village common. I think that the playground on the hill looks really cool. I want to see that built. I think this is a really amenities-rich project. And I think it needed to be, since you are a little bit in isolation. So, for, the people who live there, this can be a little bit of a standard thing. There's a lot of things they can do without ever leaving the site. I think this is an appropriate project for that site. I was glad to see that you put as much permeable paving as possible. My drawings are kind of small. It looks like you have some trees in the bioswales. You can do that, but it's a pretty small list. So you're going to have to be careful with that. And also with your reclaimed water, you have a really rich shrub and ground cover palette, but some of those may not be suitable for reclaimed water. I haven't looked at it in a while, but there were lists of plants suitable for reclaimed water, and it's not the longest list in the world. So just be aware of that. And a second. I think you've talked me into the Cathedral Oak. One thing to keep in mind, you also have the Marina Madrone on there. That is susceptible to SOD. If you don't have a lot of them on your plan, you might want to consider a different choice.
You're right. We have them very strategically placed. It's just a few of them to get the character of the red stem out.
Yeah, if there's just a few on the site and they're spread around, then it's probably not an issue. And I believe that's all I got.
Hey, Jeff. One last time, is Don Blaney with us? Leslie, can you see if you can get him or not?
Yeah, Don, again, that sounds so sad. Last chance. *6 to unmute. And we'll work on this for sure before the next meeting.
Well, I have a few comments. I think it's a great project. I'm excited to see this much housing being built on a hillside. It's a very difficult site. I realize that with a 36% slope to do anything. And I applaud the team for doing a wonderful, detailed presentation of a very well thought out project. I have a couple of concerns that I think I'd like to see addressed. Starting with the site plan, the entrance road coming into the site and then cutting off to the sides is being lined with all these, I guess, cathedral oaks, and they all seem to be kind of evenly spaced. And I don't think that that's going to look very natural on that hillside. And I'd like to see the landscape architect kind of group some of these oaks, or if that's what they are, oaks, in a way that looks a little more natural and a little less like a very formal design approach. So that's what I'd like to see there. On the perspectives, like for example, L1.02, I think the perspective really brings out the idea how articulated these buildings are and how nice they could look, particularly with the mature landscaping when the oaks eventually grow up tall enough to mask some of the height. But it looks, these perspectives all have been done in kind of dark tones. And my recollection anyway of the Hillside design guidelines is that it always encouraged darker tones. And when I look at the color board, I see very, very, very light tones in everything. And a lot of stucco rather than wood. And I would encourage the architect to reconsider some of the material choices and the color scheme to make it blend more into the hillside. Because when these 250 or when these 50, I guess there's not a lot of trees in front of the project right now, but when all these trees get removed and the project goes in and the new trees going in at 36-inch boxes, it's going to be a while before this grows into the hillside, this project. And I would like to see it recede a little more into the hillside with darker tones, and possibly even breaking up some of the, I mean, the architect's done a real good job of breaking up the massing in terms of those gables pointing east. I think that I like that with Stewart. Don't see that as a problem, but I think that there needs to be a little more breaking up of the parent wall of building that's been done. There's been a little setback, but because they're 4- and 5-story tall buildings, it seems like something else could be done. And if it can't be set back on the top floor, for example, then maybe it could be done with color or material changes that would break up the apparent massing a little bit more, so that it wouldn't be so obviously just one building with 4 or 5 rooftops. And then I'm looking at, I think the community garden area and the community market, the neighborhood market, that all works really well. I like that, the look of it, the aesthetics. It matches the rest of the rest of the project, but it does differentiate itself a little bit, so that's good. I'm a little concerned about the height of the walls, some of those retaining walls being 10 to 16 feet tall. I would encourage the architect to see if there's some way to mitigate that, either in terms of stepping maybe a smaller wall in front of it and planting it so that it doesn't quite appear 10 or 16 feet tall, or introducing some kind of landscape features that would mitigate that. It's as much for the public as it is for the residents there that large walls are going to be rather large. The other thing that I was looking at, and that is, let's see, in this, I guess it's in the other set of drawings. I'm looking at your elevations on A202. That's the elevation of building type A. I like the articulation of those buildings, but again, I think the lighter colors tend to defeat the purpose of the Hillside design guidelines as I know them. So I would encourage a slightly darker palette than what's shown. And at the same time, in this, for example, the east front elevation, you've got this, I guess that's the building behind the building B that's behind showing itself. If that could be broken up.
Which sheet is that again?
On the east front elevation on A202.
Yeah, I'm just looking for it now. Is that in?
I think
Jeff's?
that building A is 4 stories, right? It's 3 stories over a parking level.
Correct.
Yeah, and then the 4-story beyond that is, I mean, I guess you're showing that beyond, or is that the step back?
That's the setback.
Okay, if it's a setback, then I would, and if that's it, I would encourage that to be darker colors received.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
It would make it look less like a 4 or 5 story building. Well, it would be a 5-story building at that point.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, it's not so evident at the street level, but I think it's going to be much more evident in the from the freeway that people are going to see 4 and 5-story buildings against this this hillside. And so I'm trying to mitigate that look as much as possible by encouraging both darker colors for the building itself, a darker recessed color for that top floor, and possibly, you know, breaking up in color schemes or material schemes a little bit more horizontally, so that so it doesn't appear as just one large building, but a series of maybe 5 or 6 units that are collected together. And I think that it's even more obvious what I'm reacting to on your, sorry about this, A205, the east elevation of building B reads like a 5 or a 6-story building. And if that's what's going to be seen by the residents of the complex, that's the elevation they're going to see between the two, building A and building B. Is that correct? And
it'll be behind building type A. Behind.
Right, but I mean, when they're in between,
yes,
they're going to see that. And if
yes,
they're walking, you know, to their neighbors, or they're just walking around or trying to get to the neighborhood park or to the market or whatever, they're going to be walking down that driveway or that roadway with a 5 or 6-story building on one side. That's a very urban scheme. Now I understand it's not going to be seen as much by the public because it's going to be masked by the building A in front. But I'm also thinking if there's a way to at least soften that. Again, this elevation shows a very monochromatic color scheme, and predominantly very, very light colors. And so I would encourage, one, the color and material scheme to be broken up horizontally, and 2, that top floor being put into even a more recessive color scheme so that it doesn't quite appear. I know these are some architectural tricks, but I think it's going to help a lot because these are going to be tall buildings. And I understand, I applaud you for really only developing about, what, 50% of the site and keeping a lot of it in its natural state, which is really good and it's really desirable, and still getting enough housing units to make this whole project work, and then provide the additional housing that San Rafael needs. But I think the devil's in the details in this is
Yeah.
how to make it so that when these buildings go in, that they look good from the freeway and they look good from on site for the people that are going to live there.
Right.
So that's what I'm concerned about. I mean, I look at some of these elevations, like I mean, the sections A206. These are very tall buildings, you know, and so walking alongside the buildings in that driveway between building A and building B, the building A pipes, that's going to be it's going to feel like the South of Market area in San Francisco with these tall buildings. So I'm just trying to figure out a way that we can mitigate that feeling a little bit for the people that live there.
Okay.
So those are my comments. Anyone else? Did we ever?
Yeah, Chair Paul, I think that Board Member Blaney has unmuted himself. Are you available?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
now?
We do. Great.
Yes.
Hey, Don.
Wow.
Welcome.
Oh my God. I have worn off the star and the 6 on my phone. I actually had to recall in and start over. And that's
Sometimes
how
it does it when all else fails. Turn it off and turn it on again.
So let me just say a couple of things here, and I think they've already been said, but I want to agree with a lot of what you said or just finished saying, Larry. These are very tall buildings, and I'm very concerned about the people within the complex, not so much anywhere else, but within the complex, walking and driving next to these buildings. I don't know if they can set the buildings back anymore into the hillside because it'll just eat up all of the site, actually. And since it is so darn narrow, they just don't have the room for it. So I don't know what they do. The comment about the trees, everything looks so rigid to me. I'd love to see more groupings together. Maybe you leave out 1 or 2 trees for a space, an opening, and put those trees in front of the other ones. I don't know if you have room for that. It looks very tight with all the property lines. As far as the gables going downhill, I have no problem with that. This mystery oak tree, I think it's a cousin to the southern live oak, and I know that those trees like a little more moisture. And I think some of the comments that Kent had on that were pretty good. I don't know if they're good for reclaimed water or not. My biggest concern about the project is that from the freeway, although I don't know why that should bother me, but it kind of does. I would like to see a section through this site all the way down to the freeway. Do these buildings actually pop up above the ridgelines viewed from way down there? You know, we're looking at all these very pretty elevations, and the buildings I think are very attractive. And I think they're very well done. I like them a lot. I wish they weren't so big, so tall. But I think the work the architect has done is very good. I'm just afraid these buildings pop up above that ridge because you look up at them at a severe angle. All the elevations that we're shown in this project looks like from a drone that's out there about mid-level where the buildings are and looking back into the building. You really don't get the aspect of looking up at these buildings. So I'm concerned about that. And I just wonder if there's an easy way to do a section through this hillside down to the freeway. It doesn't have to be very decorative, but just a section through there. So we can see if these buildings actually pop up over the ridge lines. And that's all my comments. Again, I think the architects have done a very good job in the presentation and all of the graphics that were given. So I want to compliment them. A little late, but there they are.
Better late than never, Don. Thanks. Is there any further discussion on this matter amongst the board? Leslie, do you want to summarize our comments, or is that Jeff's job?
Yeah, consensus items. It's an attractive project. You guys did a really great job. That was definitely consensus on that. Some of the ones that popped up for me, and so please feel free to add, because I don't know how many of you repeated exactly the same things. But I do think there's a little concern with the common area to make sure that it is not overly shaded, and make sure if you want to elaborate on that, that would be great. And ability is probably to make the market marketable, to have connections to the neighborhood so that there's easy access. So it's not just for the residents, but for nearby folks to get there without getting in their cars. There are quite a few comments about the placement of the oaks, that they aren't kind of uniformly spaced, but that they can be clustered with maybe some spacing so it looks more natural. And I think there's a little bit of a consensus that the buildings are tall. Not that that is something that should be redesigned per se in terms of the overall massing due to the constraints of the site, but that some architectural darker earth tones and horizontal darker palette, especially towards the top, and some horizontal elements of materials could help mitigate that. And then again, not a consensus item, but again, related to the height, there is a concern that the height when viewed from the freeway, that these buildings would reach over the top of the ridgeway. And then there was overall, I think, support to use reclaimed water on the site and have ample solar and suggestions of what solar to use. That's what I have.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board would like to make a motion at this time? And if you do want to make a motion, announce who you are so that we have it recorded. The silence is deafening. Well, why don't we have a little more discussion on the board then? What is the? How does the board feel about what's been mentioned as far as, do we have consensus on things like the placement, the placement of the oak trees, for example, whether they should be more as the landscape architect initially presented, or do they need to be more randomly clustered to make it less rigid?
Can our two landscape architects comment on that?
Pardon me?
I think in the entryway, you could probably, break up the trees, the massing a little bit and make it a little more naturalized. You don't have a lot of room there. Between the buildings and the freeway, you pretty much have a space for, one row of trees, and screening is fairly important. I probably wouldn't break it up because you'll just have more views into the site. Larry talked a lot about color, and probably some of the color could be looked at a little bit more, but other than that, I'm happy with the project.
Stuart, you had something to say?
No, that was it. The trees, I wanted to defer to our landscape architects. I think the heights of the buildings, which was talked to by a few of you guys, yeah, it's tall, but it's also, this is a high density housing project, and high density housing projects kind of tend to get taller. So we're sort of at one of those impasses where we need these kinds of projects, and they're going to get taller based on the amount of room we have. So I look at the site and near the freeway and whatnot. I do appreciate the comment about, let's make sure we're not going to have buildings poke over the ridge tops. So I think that from many vantage points. So I think that's an important comment. But in terms of saying we can't have the tall buildings, I don't think I'm quite there, because if not here, where?
Well, I wasn't talking about not having tall buildings. I was thinking just in terms of recognizing that if it is tall, if it's going to appear tall, that if there are ways to mitigate that look so that it does not appear as tall. It's like an architectural trick, but it does work.
Yeah, I agree. But these aren't as monolithic as, like you said, South of Market buildings are like extremely vertical on one plane, and the architect here is actually busted this thing up. It's kind of asked, let's compare this to 101 North or 1101 North or whatever that building is that Monahan built off the freeway that's 4 or 5 stories tall, which is pretty monolithic looking when you stare at it. This seems to have hopefully learned from that and not done some of those things.
That's a good example though, because I think that one suffers from the fact that it doesn't have a lot of landscaping in front of it to mitigate its height. And so you really see it every time you go south on the freeway.
Exactly. And I think this one's more successful.
Anyone else want to chime in? Well, do we want this to move forward to the Planning Commission? Do we want to ask for some revisions, or at least some re-looking at some of these issues that we brought up, and then come back to us? What's the pleasure of the board?
And I also have another option, just so you're aware, and you've done it before, is to recommend, passage on to the Planning Commission with recommendations to come back for final design review, which would not hold up the entitlement process, but would let you, if you're good with the overall massing and, shape, but would like to see some refinements before it goes to building permits middle. That's another option.
Yeah, I think that's a good option, because I think most of us feel that this is a good project that just has a few details to work out, right?
Yeah.
So
That's how I feel.
Don?
That's how I feel.
So Leslie, how would we craft this motion? Would it be that are we recommending approval of the project with the applicant returning to the design review board to address the consensus items as outlined tonight?
Correct. And for my benefit, because besides that it was a well-designed project, and again, I don't think it was make the buildings smaller. I think there was some comment about mitigating the height with certain color tones and materials. I think if you guys could kind of let me know which consensus items, and I think the applicant team as well, that you would like them to focus on. And that if they can, my recommendation also is that if they can include it in the plans that goes to Planning Commission, awesome, but that it is definitely, comes back to the design review board prior to building permit issuance for your sign off.
Yeah, and if they address it earlier, then they can likely just come back on consent with us and have it roll right through if they work with
exactly.
Staff. Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm going to make the motion. So I move that we approve the project tonight, or we recommend approval. Let me rephrase that. I recommend that the design review board recommend approval of this project, subject to the applicant working with staff on the consensus items to bring that to the Planning Commission and return to the design review board upon submitting for a building permit for us to review the consensus items as detailed by staff.
So everybody want to wait for a little time for me. Are the consensus items only the oaks in the entryway and the colors on the building? I don't know what the consensus items are.
I think it'd be helpful to articulate what we're talking about for both Leslie and for the applicants. So are we talking about what? What do you think we're talking about, Stuart?
Plaza and the shadows and the high walls and the viability of the market and the parking available for the market.
I don't think there was consensus on the market and the parking for the market. Was there?
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure. Was there consensus on that, Leslie?
Well, no, there wasn't, and parking is not really under the purview of the DRB.
Yeah,
I would say that a few of you, and I missed that one, so thank you, Board Member Kowalski. A few of you did mention if there was a way to step the really tall retaining walls and or provide some either step it back or provide some vegetation or other treatment to soften it. So thank you.
So is that one consensus item for you, Stuart, to be addressed? The
Yeah, I think that perhaps Leslie can summarize the consensus items again here, so we don't have to.
Okay.
So I don't want to have them all be in the motion.
Okay. So the ones now I have are the height can be mitigated with darker tones and or horizontal elements of different materials. Trees should be relooked at where appropriate to not be as uniformly planted, but be clustered and have a more natural setting planting. There should be another look of shading in the common area. Did I get that right, Commissioner Kowalski? Yeah. And check if there's ways, like if you can present the shadow study when it comes back to the DRB in any ways that the shading can be mitigated if it turns out that it is an issue. As well as for the retaining walls, if you can look at them to either step them or if not appropriate to step them back to provide some other mitigation type treatment, such as like a living wall or some other treatment that you can come up with.
Right.
That's what I have.
Okay, I'd like to weigh in
Wait, hold
on
on
a
a second.
couple of
Is
those.
that okay with you, Stuart?
Oh, no, now we got Don, since he knows how to use his phone, so.
Well, before we go to Don, though, we still got to get a motion here.
No, he wants to add.
Oh, do you want?
No.
No,
wanted
he
to
wants to
draft.
comment, I think. So we need a motion first and then we can discuss it. So was that good for you, Stuart? Because we then need a second to even make a motion.
Member Kent seconds.
Was it good? But Stuart, were you good with that motion as it was addressed by Leslie?
Yes.
Okay, and Jeff?
Member Kent still seconds.
That seconded, right? Now we open the motion for discussion. Don, would you like to pipe in?
Yeah, I have two comments. I don't know how much they're going to do on these walls. I don't know if they're going to be able to step them any more than they already have. Maybe there can be a way we can add texture to these walls or doing something with the face of them to give them a little more interest. And as far as the shading thing, we're not going to redesign this for them. So I don't think it makes a difference if we have a shading study or not. So those are my two. I don't think we need a shading study.
Well, I think we do. I think it goes to the viability of the center of the project and whether or not that's an inviting community space or not.
Yeah, but typically shadow studies are meant for offsite impacts that might affect other people. Now, we don't generally ask applicants to do them for their own. I am 15 years on this board. I've never heard of us asking for us to do a shadow study for the benefit of our own project. I mean, that's sort of.
Was this a shadow study or was this, I think.
Shadow study.
More about shading.
No, a shadow study.
Public area, thinking that it's a little too exposed. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
I don't
correct.
think she was talking about a shadow study. It was just saying that maybe there are some opportunities to put some kind of trellis or shading structure or umbrellas even. I don't know. It's, you know, something that not everybody likes the sun.
Well, I would leave that up to the applicant myself.
So then, Stuart, do you want to take that off of the motion? As one.
Well, I believe the motion should only contain items where we have consensus. Did we have, you got 5 board members here, Leslie, so, I mean.
Okay.
Do we have, what are the items that the majority, at least 3 of us have?
Okay, so Stuart, you're not into the shading.
No,
Jeff, are you? Okay, and Don is not, so we don't have a consensus on that. So that's, Leslie, you can take that one off the consensus item. Okay?
Okay.
Any other
So
comments?
the ones, yeah.
the other ones were fine, yeah.
Comments on the motion?
Okay, so I move that the design review board approve.
You've already moved it.
You don't want the motion again?
No, you've
Okay.
already moved it, seconded. All we did was we took that one item off, so now we can vote. And I'd like Leslie to take a roll call of the members so we can have a vote.
Yes. Board Member Blaney,
Yes.
Board Member Kent,
Aye.
Board Member Kowalski.
Aye.
Board Member Summers,
Aye.
Board Vice Chair Reggie is absent, and Chair Paul.
Aye. That motion carries. Thank you all. Good luck with your project.
You guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
So we're gonna go on to item number 3 now.
May I interject, Larry?
Yes.
I'm going to recuse myself from the next item. They are a former client of mine. So I feel that for the benefit of the client and the public that I should step off.
Yes, thank you, Stuart.
All righty.
You are recused.
Thank you.
And I think theoretically you need to be out of the room.
Oh, right, I have to.
But you
thank
could be
I
on
have
Zoom.
to- I'm gonna demote you. Thank you.
I will see you
Give
later.
me
Are
a
we
moment
coming back
and-
for anything?
okay.
There's no more
There-
items after this.
There's a director's report, but I could fill you in later if you'd like.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Nothing you
Have a
need to
nice
vote
night,
on.
everyone.
Thanks, Stuart.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so
Before we start, can I make sure I have the whole the presentation applicant team here? I think I got you all.
Well, may I add a few more people to kind of join the call just in case they're needed, or do you call them up when we need them?
Why don't I promote them now? And then the people I promote now, if you're not presenting, if you could just keep your cameras off, that would be awesome. So who else?
See here, there's Bill Haynes, SWA.
Mhm.
He's the landscape
Okay.
architect, and then there's Barry, who's works for W-Trans, just in case.
W-Trans. Okay. I will rename Barry. Okay. You guys can start.
Oh, okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
All right, so item number 3 is 326 and 308 Mission Avenue, which is the Aldersley Retirement Community. The project is a phased redevelopment of the Aldersley Retirement Community, including demolition and renovation of existing buildings and construction of new buildings. The planner is Janie Alsop. And Janie, would you give us your staff report, please? You have
Yeah,
time.
and while she unmutes, I do want to introduce Janie Alsop.
There
She
you are.
is another one of our amazing contract planners of Alsop Planning Group. So take it away, Janie.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Chair Paul and members of the Design Review Board. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to share my screen. Let's hope it works.
It works.
Yay. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this project, the Aldersley Garden Retirement Community, is being referred to the Design Review Board for review of a proposed amendment to the approved development plan for the Aldersley Retirement Community. The project proposes phased improvements over the next 10 years that include demolition, renovation, and of existing buildings, and construction of 3 new buildings on the Aldersley campus. In a nutshell, the project would result in 14 additional independent living units, and that would be an increase from the 55 existing units to 69 units. And the number of assisted living memory care beds, which is currently 35, would remain unchanged. And the existing number of skilled nursing beds would also remain unchanged. So the requested applications are listed before you. We have the environmental and design review permit for the entire phase development, the zoning amendment, which essentially would revise the approved plan development that was approved back in 2002. It would also, there's a use permit application that would amend the master use permit that was approved along with the 2002 plan development. And then there will also be environmental review as required by CEQA, which is in preparation. And I should mention, it's outlined in the staff report that based on a historic resource evaluation of the campus, and that's included in a report that's listed as an attachment by Page and Turnbull. The project site is eligible as a historic district. And because the proposal would be to demolish some of the contributing buildings, that would be a significant impact. So we anticipate preparing in a focused environmental impact report that would address that issue. That is in preparation. That will be going through the process along with the other entitlements and onto the Planning Commission. And this project will require review and approval by the City Council for the zoning amendment. So the project is located in the Montecito Happy Valley neighborhood. It is located just outside of the recently adopted downtown precise plan area. As you can see, the subject site here, and the blue shaded area is the Montecito commercial sub area that's part of the precise plan. This is a site plan showing the footprint of existing buildings that are on the site. And so it's oriented with the north at the top. There's Bell Avenue that runs really, uphill and behind the main entrance and the property, Mission Avenue down here in the lower area. And the hatched buildings are existing buildings that are proposed to be demolished. So the existing uses I've already gone through. We have a mixture of memory care and assisted living, of skilled nursing, and then the independent living units. This is just a repeat of what's in the staff report on the different development standards that were adopted in 2002. There is one note that I have regarding building height in the staff report. There was mention of a 40-foot height limit, and that would be the actual vertical plumb distance if one were to go out and measure. However, the calculated building height based on the zoning definition, which takes into account a reference datum, the maximum building height would be within the 36 feet. That is reflected in the existing plan development, and that is the height limit that is proposed for the new PD plan development. There is a total of 56 parking spaces that would be at build out of all 4 phases. And there would be an increase of parking by 8 spaces. And there's details regarding the parking and traffic study that's included in the staff report. So again, this is a phased project given the proposed 10+ year time frame that is envisioned. The focus of this review and on the plans that are presented, the overall site plan, of course, including landscaping. And as far as the architecture, phases 1 and 2 are shown in detail, and the other subsequent phases 3 and 4 in a more conceptual nature. The design review board should feel free to offer comments and recommendations on the overall site plan and all phases of proposed development. But again, the focus is at this point is on phases 1 and 2. And as indicated by Planning Manager Mendez, in the last project, this project may be subject to further design review, and the DRB can make recommendations on certain aspects or any aspects of the project that the board feels should come back to the board. So this is a depiction of where phase 1 is proposed. Primarily runs along the Mission Avenue frontage with a new Mission Avenue independent living building, and also some reconfiguration and renovation of the Friedensborg building on the west side of the project site. I believe the project architect will be going into a lot of the aspects of the architecture in more detail. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but of course, if there are any questions or anything from staff that I haven't covered at the end, please feel free to ask. Phase 2, you can see, is part of the area at the upper elevations along Bell Avenue, where there is currently a service entrance and a loading and unloading area. And then phase 3 would be a change to the existing Christianborg building. Phase 4 is referred to as the West Campus independent living that would take place right along the west property line of the project. This is an illustrative master plan that shows all of the proposed buildings at build out. And again, that's proposed to take place over a 10-year period. I've included just a couple of key elevations of the most prominent buildings. This is the east elevation of the Mission Avenue independent living building, and this is proposed right along Mission Avenue. You can see that the project architect has included information on these elevations relative to the reference datum and how that's calculated per our zoning ordinance. And this is an elevation, the south elevation. So this is the Mission Avenue elevation. These buildings it's the proposed new service building that would be along Bell Avenue. And you can see the existing Rosenborg building there to the left. That is the most recently constructed building. It was constructed in 2004. This is an elevation from Bell Avenue of the West Campus independent living. So again, that's part of proposed phase 4. And these are various elevations of the Fredericksburg new wing that would be added. This shows the color palette and exterior materials that are proposed, and they're also detailed on the architectural elevations. This is just a cutout of the site sections that are included in the set of plans. You can see the slope nature of the project site. And these are other cross sections that are included in the plan. And I haven't included them in the PowerPoint, but I believe the architect will touch on this in the plan, in the plan set. There are site plans that are based on the different key elevations on the project site, which is really, I think, one of the design challenges that the project team had to work with in terms of integrating the buildings that will remain with the new buildings and making sure that all the site access works. We did have a neighborhood meeting. This says June 9th, I believe it was June 5th of last year. And overall, this was via a Zoom meeting. Overall, there were favorable comments. No major issues were raised during the neighborhood meeting. And I do know that the Aldersley folks did do a lot of outreach very early on in the process with the homeowners associations and or neighborhood associations and the neighbors. So that seemed to really help people stay involved and be aware of the project. And there was one phone call that I received based on the public notices that went out recently, and the caller didn't raise any specific concerns, but was requesting information about the timing of demolition and the construction schedule. And as far as I am aware, and Leslie, if you are aware of any other public comments that have come in, please let us know at the appropriate time. But I don't believe there have been any other public comments on this project at this time. So this, I'm not going to read through it, but it goes through the design review board's purpose and authority. So the rest is going to really focus on the items that are within the board's purview. There was conceptual design review as well as a pre-application that was submitted back a couple of years ago. And the design review board subcommittee conducted a conceptual design review back in August of 2020. The comments offered during the conceptual design review are listed here as well as in your staff report. Parking was mentioned as a concern, given there's always been a concern about the project not taking up too much of the street parking in that area, because street parking is used heavily. It was noted that landscaping would be important, especially along the Mission Avenue frontage. Stormwater drainage requirements and bioretention planners, permeable pavers were all mentioned as something that should be evaluated and included in the plans. And massing was raised as an important issue, particularly along the Mission Avenue frontage. Mass reducing techniques were recommended, such as upper story step backs and material and color choices. So as noted in the staff report, there are 4 areas where staff is seeking the board's input. And one is on the architecture, building height and mass. The next item is exterior colors and materials. The third discussion item is the master landscape plan. And the fourth item is the overall site plan. Does the proposed phase development demonstrate efficient use of the site? The staff recommendation for this design review board is to review and recommend approval of the site and building design to the Planning Commission. And as I mentioned, because there is a zoning amendment involved, it will also go to the City Council. That is the conclusion of the staff presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions now or after the applicant's presentation.
I have a question. This is Don. Am I unmuted?
Larry's
You're unmuted, Don. Go ahead.
Could you just quickly go through the calculation for height, building height? You'd mentioned that the limit was 40 feet and these buildings are at 36. Is that what I heard?
Well, you did hear a 40-foot height limit mentioned, or a 40-foot number mentioned, but that is for a plumb vertical distance. It is not based on the zoning code definition of how height is measured, which takes into account it's a formula where you determine what the reference datum is to measure height from. And that's where you go 5 feet out from the footprint of the building. You make a determination about how far the lowest point is from the highest point. It's quite involved, as a matter of fact. But after having a couple of discussions with the planning manager and with the architect, we are satisfied that the building height, as it's calculated per the code definition, would be within the 36 feet.
So the buildings are no taller than 36 feet.
As measured by our zoning code, the building height, yes, the definition of building height. So again, it takes into account a reference datum from which the height is actually measured to the upper part of the, depending on the roof, whether it's the midpoint of a sloped roof or the deck of a mansard roof or the flat roof.
Okay. That was all the questions I had.
Great. Any other questions of staff?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm a little curious how far reaching the precise plan is. This seems like it's quite a ways away from the downtown area.
Well, this project is not within the precise plan area. It's just north, but directly across the street to the south on the other side of Mission Avenue. And I can go back to that slide. So the Marin Commons senior housing is here. And I believe this is the Salvation Army property. This is Mary Street here, and this is Union Street. So the area shaded in blue is part of the downtown precise plan area, but this project is just north of that area.
But they're still able to use the guidelines as outlined in the precise plan? Or they're not?
No, so the Aldersley project site has an approved plan development from 2002. So it has its own set of development standards. It's completely independent of the downtown precise plan.
Got it. And then another question I have, it's a historical district, but none of the buildings are on the historical registry, but there is a chance that they may not be able to do this project unless they get a variance. Is that correct?
Well, I guess to put it another way, you're correct. None of the buildings are listed on the city's historic inventory. However, because of the age, over 45 to 50 years, because these buildings date back to the mid 1900s in terms of when they were developed. So Aldersley is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year, but none of the original buildings are on the site. All of the buildings that are deemed eligible as historic resources were built in the late 40s and 50s and 60s. Because the buildings that are proposed to be demolished are eligible. They've not been designated as historic or listed on the national or the state register, but because they're eligible under CEQA, we treat them as if they are historic resources. So that is what the CEQA document will address. It's not really a variance situation as much as it is reviewing the project under CEQA for significant impacts.
Okay, I got it. And one final question is, when I look at this project built out, it looks like the vast majority of the site is covered. But when I read the staff report, it says it's only like 52 point something. And I realize we don't use sidewalks and parking lots as part of the coverage calculation, but it seems like it's more than that, just visually looking at that. So I guess I'm a little curious of what the current GAR is for this site. Does anybody know that? Because it looks like it's being increased a great deal.
It may be something that the project architect would know. And just to put a finer point on your question, I believe that the lot coverage calculations were that came up during the conceptual design review, that based on the graphic provided, it looked I can't recall who it was, but
Probably me.
it might have been someone really said to make sure and double check that, which I immediately went back to the team and requested that the project architect confirm and double check those numbers. And so, Sue, if you're listening now, if you could perhaps address that as part of your presentation, that might be helpful. But yes.
Great, thank you. That's my last question.
Any other questions of staff while we're on that? No, okay, then the applicant, who would like to start? The applicant team.
If it's okay, I'd like to just start real quick. My name is Gilbert and I'm the executive director over at Aldersley. Thank you, board members, for reviewing our plan tonight. I know it's really late, so we'll try to make it as quick as possible on our side.
Thank you.
I think, we, as Janie said, we're celebrating actually 100 years. Our anniversary is actually this December. And so we've enjoyed being a good neighbor in the Montecito area and Happy Valley for quite some time. The goal is that we really want to continue to sustain the community for another 100 years. And so part of that goal is that we need to make Aldersley financially viable, which currently it is not. And so part of what we are looking at is trying to add more independent living units, and more importantly, trying to create a better presence of the community of Aldersley within the community. So a lot of the things that we're adding would be residential living apartments, improving campus accessibility, centralizing our main entry, and then adding more services for older adults here in Marin. So the plan doesn't significantly increase our total resident population or our current staff, but it does provide the right size of apartments and amenities. And I think that this will meet the current and future resident expectations. So I'd like to pass it over to Sue M., who is our project architect and principal architect with Perkins Eastman, so she can do the application overview.
Thank you, Gilbert. And thank you, board, for staying with us so late. My name is Sue M. I'm the project architect on this for this proposal. And this is an existing plan of the current campus. And I think the current open space calculates to be around 35-36%. And just to quickly address, I think on the cover page of our submission, we're documenting that our proposed site plan is showing 52% percentage coverage. And so just wanted to note that before I forget, before we move on. And we can come back to look at those numbers more specifically if needed here on this presentation. And just to quickly go through the master plan, what's highlighted in yellow, those are the areas that we're proposing to rebuild essentially. Because of the building is relatively old and they were designed with smaller footprint in mind, with majority of the units being studio, they don't currently meet the current the demands of the current market. Most of the independent livings apartments were designed as studio, as I mentioned, and they do not actually have a full kitchen. So the residents actually don't have means to provide their own meals. So they're dependent on the meal service from the community. So as part of the proposed improvements, we are aiming to increase the overall square footage of the units. So they are aiming to be more in the 1-bedroom plus area. So we can share those numbers in a moment with a full kitchen. So they do have the means to prepare their own meals and things like that. And overall with some additional amenities, it's going to make our Aldersley much more of a viable option in the current market and a lot more competitive, which is going to ensure their longevity down to the next century. So that's the overall goal. And then again, highlighting the yellows, those were the different phases. We also recognize that Aldersley is considered a garden community. And one of the things that's really unique about the community is that every unit at the moment is actually entered from outdoors. There are no existing corridors. to actually access these buildings, and it sits on a site with a 50-foot height difference from front to back. So when we actually vertically measure elevation from Mission Avenue to Bell Avenue on the north side, we are traveling over 50 feet in height. So you can imagine the difficulty the residents go through as they age when they're dependent more on the walkers and wheelchairs, and it's as much as the garden aspect of the community is very beneficial, the accessibility of some of these outdoor spaces are challenging. So as part of the proposed new building, we're also proposing a way to organize the vertical circulation at different levels of the campus so that we can provide better access to different levels by and then that's proposed to be done through the Mission Avenue Independent Living, which will be in phase 1, and also the Western Independent Living, which is proposed to be as part of the last phase of the project. As part of the phase 2, I think I can move on to those elements, but else, and then this is an illustration of the section. So with to your right is the Mission Avenue with adjacent property across the street, and to your left is the Bell Avenue. And you can see the height difference, and that we were mentioning is over 50 feet. But what we're also illustrating here is that the roof that's shown in kind of more faint lines on the left, those are existing roof lines for our buildings. So we carefully masked the building so that it sits below the existing roof lines. So from our neighbor's perspective, there is no obstruction of their views from their current existing views. So those were elements were really important to consider. And we've had I know Janie noted the meeting that we recently had, but we've had actually multiple meetings and series of meetings, invited our neighbors to sit in our design charrettes over the years. So I think these were some of the aspects of the projects that were very appreciated by our neighbors. And then going through the phasing. So as Janie mentioned, we are proposing majority of our new build out as a part of the first phase. And that is so that we can actually increase the independent living apartment stock right up front, which is going to really ensure the financial feasibility for the community. And so that's being proposed as the first phase. And then along with that, we want to improve the drop off and the driveway access into the building. And also its accessibility and it's also appearance from the street, so it's easier to find. Currently, you have to do a bit of soul searching to figure out where the main entry for the building is. So we hope to fix that as part of this proposal as well. Then part of the phase 2, this is where we're proposing to add the service building to the Bell Avenue, which we'll go into a little bit more further detail later, so that it's going to actually provide vertical access so that the staff no longer have to push the wheels and the carts across the campus along these ramps that are not quite accessible, and then really provide elevator access to those spaces. And we hope to also improve the drop off and trash pickup situation from the Bell Avenue. So that will be also an improvement for the neighborhood as well. Kind of moving on. This is a unit count that we wanted to demonstrate. We mentioned that there are going to be a net increase of 14 units overall. But what's more significant for us to recognize is that, again, it's not so much about increasing the unit count, but making the units a little bit more livable, so that currently our average unit size is ranging anywhere from 390 to 740 with an average of 560. So we hope to improve that to more 950, again, making that more marketable for the current users. Focusing on phase 1, we mentioned earlier, I'm going to go through this really quickly. So this is where we're adding most of the new independent living stock, with improved entry and driveway access to the front entry, and also improving the entry to the rear, so that the sightline that we currently have into the parking garage is going to be skewed so that it's more friendly to the neighborhood, and also providing some surface parking to that side. We're also proposing to add a second dining venue as part of the amenity improvement, which is going to provide better opportunities for gathering spaces for the existing residents. Looking at the existing building character, Janie has mentioned that these buildings are they're eligible for historical registration. And some of the important aspects of the community was that we wanted to celebrate the character of the buildings that really makes it unique to this era. So the elements, the use of the brick and glass, and then the glass are expansive with divided lights, but for the most part, they're not simply punched windows, but again, they're expansive windows that follow the low pitched roof lines that are prominent on campus. And also with short overhanging eaves with rafter tails details that's very prominent on campus. Also looking at how the brick, the glazings utilized, this kind of goes back to, you can see how the like where there are brown wood panels that really houses the windows. You can see how those elements are treated. So they're vertical elements, and the glass is sitting within the wooden panels rather than the brick. So these are some of the elements that we wanted to pick up as part of something that we can celebrate in our new building portions. So looking at the Mission Avenue view from the Mary Street, so this is a main intersection in front on the Mission Avenue side. You can see the existing building that's currently there. And here's an illustration of what we're proposing to add on to it. So as part of our proposal, we're proposing to use same material that's existing on campus. So there's no introduction of new material. So we're reutilizing wood look panels. We're not actually using wood as part of the building. We're going to, we would not be having actually pure wood, but at the same time, we want to bring in a lot of the warmth of the wooden panels and then the look that it provides and the color. We're also providing brick elements and the panels and glazing that are reminiscent of the existing campus, so that it fits into the context. We also wanted to celebrate the Danish heritage that the community is celebrating, and bring in some of the aspects of the simple lines and the gestures from Danish architecture. So as kind of the front, as the front entry into the building, this is where we're celebrating those elements with wood look elements on the underside of the balconies and the patios, and then creating that inviting look. And then kind of looking at the east, again, this is we're recognizing that this building has two sides and two approaches from the Mission Avenue. So we didn't want to leave this. So even though our main entry is on the west side, we didn't want to leave the east unattended. So again, like kind of looking at the east end of the elevation and how that celebrates kind of similar language was important to the board, the Aldersley board. Back in, so this was the concept design proposal that we had provided back in May 2020. And then we had a conversation with part of this group back in August of 2020. So some of the recommendations that came up, and then I think our rendering, we have taken up a notch to make it a little bit more holistic with material representation. But some of the recommendations that we received is that some of the lighter colors that were emphasizing the verticals and the corners felt a little bit out of context. So we reconsider, and also how do we enhance the overall streetscape, and also emphasize kind of Aldersley presence. So that was one aspect of it. And can we potentially recess the top floor when material change to help reduce the appearance of the building? So, so we just wanted to show where we were and some of the comments that we received then, and that was incorporated into our current information that's shown here. So we have eliminated all the lighter colors and kind of reintroducing the colors that are currently present on campus. And we have recessed the top floor with larger balconies on top. So you can see where there's white, you can see that larger balcony. So creating that shadow line along the top hopefully helps to reduce the massing in the overall color palette as well. And then this is the same elevation that Janie has shared. Because we sit on a hillside, by the time we get to the garage and the backside, we're really underground. So the finished floor is at 1 story up versus the front. So That's where our building is stepping up the hill with our three-story massing. And on the top floor, we're proposing to build a portion of it. So again, from the Mission Avenue, we're maintaining our three-story look that's under the provided elevation height limitation. And the material palette, again, going back to the existing, but providing the current material that mimics the old look. So this is the palette that we have provided. I know that massing has been a bit of concern for everyone. We're providing some simulations along the Mission Avenue. So this is a current view from east to west, and you can see our neighbors across the street, which is also a story building. And then this rendering simulates our building into the site, so we can see in context how this relates to the building that's across the street. And we also wanted to talk about the improvement on phase 2 that we're proposing as part of the Bell Street improvement. So a lot of the comments that we heard from the neighbors is that it's a very narrow street and there's already exists a parking and issue along that area. So when we add trash pickups and delivery on top of it, it can get somewhat congested. So currently there is a trash enclosure that sits along here. So what we're proposing as part of our service building is that we will inboard the trash inside the building. So it will be within the conditioned space with rollout bins, providing like really open driveways. So the delivery and delivery trucks and the trash pickups can happen more pulled into the driveway rather than sitting along the along the street. So we're hoping that this will be a huge improvement for overall congestion that's occurring on Bell Avenue. And just to address kind of the rest of the phases, and we understand we're coming back for additional review when these buildings are ready to proceed. But we wanted to kind of emphasize that currently it's a single, even though it's up 3-4 stories up from the Mission Avenue, it's a single story building with only portion of the line visible from Bell Avenue. And our intention is to keep it that way. So you're seeing below on the lower renderings, those are the new massing with the change in some of those buildings, but the overall appearance of the massing, and we're proposing to renew the, we will replace the gates so that in the overall appearance and then what's visible from the street will be similar to what's there today. And I think that's so I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant?
Yeah, I have one. Just one quick one. It appears that there's a lot of units that are pretty far away from the potential drop-off zones, and that condition probably exists today. I'm just wondering what kind of aid or help residents can get from drop-off zones getting to their units, since you perceive the age of the residents are to be going from what, in the 60s to more like in the 80s. So it seems like they'll need more help and not less.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a plan for that?
Yes. So I think with the proposed plan, what we're doing is building a concentration of independent living units within the new building. And the elevator and the floor lines are designed so that they're connecting into the building. So for instance, there are units here that are connected to this building. And then we are creating internal connection between the two buildings so that this elevator could be utilized to access this building. And similarly, we're providing ramp systems. And so, the new building, the new IL building is going to do quite a bit, trying to provide that vertical access to right level or terrace. So even though like without providing elevator every building, it will be able to at least land you on the right level. So you don't have to negotiate the different elevations. Now, where that leaves us in terms of challenge is these separate elements that are in the west part of the campus. So for the initial part, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that we can do beyond what's happening today. But with the new western IL buildings that we're proposing, this also will have a couple of different elevators to access different levels. So between the two buildings at the final build out, we hope to access most of the levels through elevators.
Yeah, I think my question was more specifically about how do they get to, the phase 4 units from where they might be dropped off, and maybe how does they get to the other amenities that are available on the site, cafeteria, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, so the lowest level of the phase 4 building is connected to the lawn, and then they'll have connection into these buildings. So again, it's the nature of the campus is such that it celebrates that outdoor space, and the residents quite appreciate that. And so one of the things that we needed to make sure is that we're actually not eliminating the stair passage that's in place, which they consider their and the exercise in play, built into the campus, but also providing alternate routes where they can use elevators to access different levels. So it's not going to be, it's where what we don't have the connected corridor system that's going to be internalized consistently, but with a transfer of an elevator that, the hope is that you can access all levels. So from this West Campus, again, they'll be coming through the lawn and the passage that's provided here into this building, and then crossing across into this building, and then most of the amenities will be in this building and this building.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant?
I have a question.
Sure.
In building 4, is there a drop off over there as well? Is there an entry? No?
There is not a formal drop off at the building 4, but there is an access from the Bell Avenue.
And what kind of units are in number 4?
They are independent living.
So those people would drive? Maybe.
Yes and no. I think majority of what we're seeing as a trend is that because of the amenities that are provided, shared shared cars, like shuttles, shared cars, and also like with increased use of like Uber and Lyft, we're seeing the parking. So many of these residents will show up with their car, and within first 6 months, they will actually abandon them. So that we're seeing that in majority of our senior living communities, most of the parking lots are 70% occupied.
Okay.
Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, is that the conclusion of your presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. Then let's open the hearing up for public comment. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this matter?
So if you wish to speak and you are calling in, please dial *9 to raise your hand. And if you are an attendee here and can use the raise the hand icon at the bottom of the screen, please do so by hovering over it. I'll just give it a few more seconds. It looks like no member of the public wishes to speak.
Are there any members of the public out there?
There are 3.
But they don't wish to speak, okay. All right then, at this time, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the Design Review Board to ask any follow-up questions. Anyone have any other questions? Okay, no questions. How about any comments? Jeff, would you like to start? Jeff, you have to unmute yourself. Jeff, you have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
I know that was the goal. I was looking for the button. I was mostly thinking, oh, thank you for letting me go first. I don't know, maybe I'm kind of old and nostalgic. I've been driving by that site for a lot of years, and there's the brick and the wood and it's built into the hill, and you barely even recognize her there, except for the last building that's been built that has by far the strongest presence on that site, and maybe that's not a good omen for develop, changes for the rest of the site. It just, when I see 5.2 something lot coverage, it just feels like it's a whole lot more than that. I just looked at it, it looks like 70. And I think part of what happens is, even Aldersley right now, they advertise themselves as being this garden community, and I see the garden going away. And even if it is, a little over 50% lot coverage, I think what happens here is, with the placement of the buildings and the landscape that's left over, instead of these big landscaped areas now, they become this collection of little spots kind of scattered about the site. So it really loses that. And I think in so many ways, and I understand what you're trying to do, and maybe the problem is me, but for me, I just look at this project and the site has just lost all its charm. So you're going to remove a lot of landscape just for kind of a point of edification, that you're going to remove all this mature landscape, and then you're going to plant a new landscape, and now you have to irrigate. So just so you're going to start using a lot more water than you were in the past, even though it's a smaller landscape. I think the palette that you've put out there by SWA, I think, is a real rich palette. I think perhaps maybe my biggest disappointment in the landscaping is that, and maybe you can explore a little bit more permeable paving on your site and try to reduce the bioswales that are all along Mission. The area where you have, a building that's right up against Mission, and you have your parking, you have your bioswales. So you have the least amount of good opportunity to screen the building and the parking. So if that could, and I understand why it's there, because it's at the bottom of the hill. So I don't know what you do about that, but I think it's a real disadvantage to have all the bioswales there. I still think the building along Mission is pretty boxy. You've stepped back some of the patio areas, but I think the intent was, when it was suggested, that perhaps the whole floor be set back instead of just a little, in and out, a little yin and yang. Like I said, I think that the buildings now look a lot more institutional, and I really think the whole project has really lost its charm that it's had for many years. And that's my comments.
Thank you, Jeff. Sharon, would you like to offer your comments?
Yeah, I do think it could use more articulation along Mission as well. And I wish there was more brick that makes it a little bit more like it was. It is a fixture. It's what, it's been there a long time. And it looks a little bit like Emeryville, or a little bit, doesn't say, how do you say that word, Hygge? I don't get that from these facades. So I think it needs to get warmed up, and I think that would warm it up to the community as well and make it a more attractive place to live. I wonder about the people who have independent living that, independent living, they're going to go to the grocery and come back with a bag of stuff. Where do they park their car, and how do they get to, building 4? I don't, do they park on the street?
No, our residents actually haven't, they actually park in Rosenborg. So that big ugly building that was approved in 2002 that, we're talking about, that I don't really understand how it was approved either. I mean, it was set up in that same scenario where their garage is underneath it. And that's where the residents park. So today, our residents are traveling stairs, elevators, all sorts of stuff trying to get up to that hill. And so part of our commitment in trying to do this is to try to address a lot of the issues in one of these buildings. And so this building is massed a lot larger because of the fact that we're connecting it to that other building. We could have probably built, maybe one or two separate buildings, and we looked at it in different ways. But when you started looking at the idea of this ability to be able to transfer around the campus, when you have an elevator that is down and residents can't get to their apartment, where you have to hire the maintenance guy to help them up the stairs or do those types of things, you have to start beginning to look at these buildings and start trying to figure out how they can combine together. And I think that's where the difficulty has been. Our hope is that our residents are encouraged by, being able to come on the shuttle and being able to get dropped off at the front entrance and then go up the elevator to the third floor, or even the fourth floor where it matches with our third floor up on that other building, and be able to just walk across the campus with their bags, or with someone able to assist them, because we have staff right there at the front office that could help a resident with their groceries over to their apartment. So
thank you, Gilbert, but not necessary to respond to this.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's just that it's more of a question, I think, and now a comment. But let's get all the comments out from all the board members. Okay. Do you have any other comments, Sharon?
No, not at this time.
How about you, Don? Are you there?
Yep, I'm here. I guess it just seems like everything is just crammed into this site. I mean, there's just really no spaces you can go to the outside. Maybe you don't need those spaces. This 50% coverage, I don't think that's right, to be honest. But that's the biggest thing that affects me, is just that it looks like every square inch of this piece of property is going to have a building on it, a tall building. And it's unfortunate. I guess for the viability, in order to keep the place going, they need all these extra units. That's too bad. But I just think it's just all just crammed in there. I guess that's the glaring thing for me. Other than that, I have no problem.
Is it done? Okay, thank you. Well, I don't see it as being crammed in. I think the architects have done a very good job of trying to solve some of these problems that are inherent in an old project on a steep site. I still see a lot of open space and gardens. I'm a little concerned about the Mission Street building, because it's fairly massive and fairly unrelenting in its walled effect. I think the architects have done an admirable job of trying to break it up and articulate it with colors and setbacks, so that they've managed to mitigate a fair amount of that. And like Jeff said, it's going to be different than what it was, and it's going to be hard to get used to that. But the building on the other side of the street is very similar. It looks like it has a very similar setback, and it's not as articulated. It's a little more recessive because of the dark colors and the wood siding and the more residential character. This tends to have a little more contemporary look, even though it's trying to match the Aldersley aesthetic. I would like to see a little more articulation in maybe the roof lines of that building, so that it doesn't seem so monolithic as a building. And I'm like the end elevation, the east elevation of that building looks great. I think it's just, if somehow that could turn its corner and make it a little more like that on the south elevation, so that it looked a little less monolithic, that would be helpful. I wonder if the building itself could be set back a little bit more. I guess it's at the minimal setback from Mission Street. If it could be set back, say, another 5 feet or so, that's something that might mitigate the apparent height of the building. But I mean, I'm looking at this building in comparison to the one on Mission and Lincoln that we saw a couple of weeks ago or a couple months ago now, and that virtually covered the entire site with no open space on it except for roof decks, if you recall. So this has some real open space that's outdoor gardens and spaces between the buildings. So I think it's a far cry from that one on Mission and Lincoln. So I think they've done a good job of addressing as many issues as they could. It's just, I think it would be nice if there would be a little more architectural design put into trying to mitigate the walling effect of that one new building. The other buildings, you know, the whole site plan is basically on an angular basis, and except for that area in the southeast corner, but that's broken up because of the smaller buildings. I think there's 3 buildings and they're all smaller. They're being replaced by one large building, very rectilinear, so it kind of competes with the angular direction of the rest of the site plan. The phase 4 picks that up, so it keeps right in keeping with the site plan. But this one, it presents a radical change, and that's going to be a little hard to get used to. But if there's, if there was some way to even incorporate an angled bay in the middle of that building, that might help somewhat. Or recognize that at the western end of that new building, it just kind of sticks out rather than respects the angle of that of the rest of the site plan. So I think that's my only concern. But I think that I think the project. I applaud you for picking up all the materials and colors of the existing building and of the existing project of the existing site, and it really works well. I think it's just there's a couple of details that need to be tweaked and it would be successful. So those are my comments. Do we have any consensus, Leslie?
I think the one consensus item is on the building that faces Mission Street, that is monolithic, and consideration should be to different architectural means to break it up through different angles or further art recesses or step backs, or even increasing the setback. And though not consensus, 3 of the 4 members do feel that it seems overly developed with not enough garden space. Yes.
Can we add one more thing? I think there should be an effort made to reduce the bioswales on the Mission Street side, because I think some of the screening there is going to be really imperative. Assuming it's consensus.
Yeah.
We have consensus on that? Don?
I agree. Yes.
So does any member would like to make a motion?
I recommend that we continue this project to allow the applicant to address the consensus items as outlined by staff.
That was Jeff Kent making the motion.
It was.
Is there a second?
Sharon
I'll
Kowalski
second that.
makes a second.
Oh, there was a fight.
Who was first?
Kidding.
Sharon or Jeff?
I heard Sharon Kowalski. I
Okay.
think she stated her name.
That's good by me. That's good by me.
Okay. Otherwise, we'll come to fisticuffs.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, would you take a roll call vote, Leslie?
Yes. Board Member Blaney.
Aye.
Board Member Kent.
Aye.
Board Member Kowalski.
Aye.
Board Member Summers has recused himself. Vice Chair Reggie is absent. Chair Paul.
Aye. So that is unanimous that the applicant should consider the items that we've mentioned and try to address them and come back for the next meeting when they're ready.
And
Any questions that the applicant may have of the board before we go on?
So, yeah, this is Peter. Just from the timing perspective, so there will be another, or as you mentioned, whenever we're ready to make these, to address the comments, to come back for another design review. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right.
Okay.
I think it might be possible that if you address the comments adequately, that it come back on a consent item. And then if it comes back on a consent item and some board member wants to pull it off the consent calendar, they can do that too. So it just depends on how you respond to these comments. Is that clear? So when you go back and look at what we've said, and the architect starts to address these things and feels that you've addressed them adequately for your own purposes and addressing our comments, then you would resubmit and get rescheduled for another design review board meeting. And I guess Leslie would decide whether it's for consent or not. You would decide whether you put it was adequately addressed. The staff would look at it and see if it adequately addressed, if the new submittal adequately addressed our comments. Leslie could put it on the calendar as a consent item, and then when we see it, if we feel that it's approvable, that it works, then we would just approve it on consent. Or if one of the members wants to pull it off the consent calendar, they are free to do so, and then we just discuss it again like today. Is that clear?
Both Janie and I will work with you.
Yeah. So thank you very much. That concludes that item. And I think then the next one is our director's report.
Yes, so I have a few items from the director. One was that City Council on Monday accepted 17 pages of comments on the San Rafael Transit Center draft EIR. And the big picture items in kind of the consensus items, I would call them. In some cases, the DER relies on incorrect or outdated assumptions regarding ridership with reference to General Plan 2020 instead of General Plan 2040, and the range of alternatives was not adequate. Other comments that were sort of consensus is that in some cases, the DEIR omits analysis and disclosure of certain impacts, such as vibration-related impacts, impact on historical resources, and traffic-related impacts. And the meeting was not about selecting a siting option, but rather focused on the DER. And the City Council emphasized its need to recirculate. But that's an FYI. The second thing is the next phase of Grant Street Bridge project which is Caltrans Grant Street Bridge projects, will involve the San Rafael off-ramp closure the weekend from Friday, October 22nd at 10 p.m. to Monday, October 25th, 5 a.m. So be sure to avoid that area that weekend. The third thing that she wanted to relay is that the Housing Element community meeting is expected to be held on October 27th, and this is the kind of kicked off meeting for the start of the new round of the Housing Element, and that notices will be going out soon. And I just wanted to add something, which would be, I guess, the planning manager's report, just as there's been some discussion of landscaping, is, in case you are not aware, the Marin Water passed ordinance 453 in July 20th, actually. And it states that new water service connections are prohibited from using potable water for the installation of any new landscaping until after the termination of the current water shortage emergency. And landscaping includes fountains and ponds. So it will be interesting when landscaping plans are submitted to Marin Water. Many of the landscaping plans that you are reviewing now may have to be placed on hold until after the drought has abated to some degree. So if you're interested, I can send you a little PowerPoint that Marin Water put together, which is a nice summary, and I can send it to all of you.
I would like a copy of that. Is the project delayed or just the installation of landscaping?
Just the installation of landscaping. And there needs to be an agreement that any landscaping that is installed will be using non-potable water only. So some of it, I was thinking about that during your discussion regarding the Cathedral Oaks. And so.
I'd like a copy of that also. Thank you.
Yep, I'll send it to all of you. And if you're not interested, you can delete.
How would that work though if a building project went forward and the landscape couldn't be put in because of the potable water restriction to ensure that that landscaping would be eventually installed?
That is a very good question. I will follow up on that. I was told that Marin Water was going to follow up, and take care of that. So on one hand, I have enough on my plate, but it is a very interesting question. And I think that it's, of concern to everyone in the community. So
seems like
to be determined, I'll let you know.
Some kind of a bond would be required.
Yeah.
Performance bond.
Yeah.
Well, at least labor and materials bond. So that if they didn't perform, the city could go in and put it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else?
And that's all I have. No.
Are there any board communications? I have one, or a question. On this particular site, this had a hefty elevation rise from Mission to Bell. And it seems like it's even more than that Mission and Lincoln project. And they took advantage of that height measurement in the building code that wasn't done here. Was there a difference for that in the site? Does anyone remember
that? I've struggled with the whole height building thing forever, so I don't know.
Do you know about that, Leslie or Janie?
No.
I'm not familiar other than this. I believe the other project you're referring to came back and requested a height bonus. And this
well, they did. They requested a height bonus because they were adding
at another level. Yeah.
More affordable units, supposedly. But it was the way they measured the height because of the difference between the height at the street and the height at the very back portion of the lot. And so it subsequently allowed them to have a much higher height. I think it was like it's 65 feet at the southeast corner, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And it was just an aberration in the building code that allowed that. And I was just wondering why it didn't apply here. Not that I like it to apply, but.
Right. Are you referring to the 800 Mission project? Or which is the other project you're referring to?
It's on Mission and Lincoln. It was the assistant,
Yeah.
I think Aegis.
Okay, yeah.
I was that was the other one that, you know, had 100% coverage on the lot. There was no open space basically. And so I just wondered how they did all these things. Anyway.
I will learn that too. And if at some point, if you all would like a little, because I know of that. And I think Janie has heard that too about the height as per the UC, you know, the building code. And I'm not like, what does that mean? So that's a very good question.
Any other communications from the board? Hearing none, then we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming and sticking with it.
Yeah, thank you for your time and service.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks, Don, for coming in.
Oh, you bet.